Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Lompoc City Council for September 17th, 2024. Madam Clerk, would you please call roll?
Councilmember Ball.
Here.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Present.
Councilmember Vega.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gilda Aiello.
Here.
Mayor Janelle Osborne.
Here. Please rise and join me and Pastor Ron Cockrell for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening, good people of Lompoc. Mayor, our city council, city clerk, our chief of police, chief of fire department, our city manager, blessings on you. And would you join me as we go before the Heavenly Father and ask for his wisdom and his leadership. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity that we can come together and touch and agree and pray that our leaders are blessed, their families are blessed, and in tonight's business, Lord, we ask for your help and your support. Give wisdom and understanding to our leaders. Father, we thank you for our city of Lompoc and the good things that are happening here. I can't think of any better place I would want to be but in Lompoc. And that is the truth, because the mosquitoes get blown out to Buellton. And Lord, we want to thank you for all things in your name. Everyone say amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would ask that our lovely ladies from the Daughters of the American Republic join us. I believe that's who's here. To have a proclamation. Come on, don't be shy. All right. So it is Constitution Week, and given we're in election season, we all know how important that is. So I am here to present the proclamation for Constitution Week, whereas the Constitution of the United States of America, the guardian of our liberties, embodies the principle of limited government in a republic dedicated to rule by law. And whereas September 17th, 2024 marks the 237th anniversary of the framing of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and its memorable anniversary and to the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate it. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America, designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. And whereas it is the privilege and duty of the American people to commemorate the 237th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America with appropriate ceremonies and activities. Now therefore I, Janelle Osborne, Mayor of the City of Lompoc, California, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through the 23rd of 2024 as Constitution Week in the City of Lompoc, and urge our citizens to study the Constitution, reflect on the privilege of being an American with all the rights and responsibilities which that privilege involves. Thank you so much for bringing this every year and for bringing the information that's in the lobby for those to take with them. And the microphone is now yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Marley Bedford. I was just elected the regent of our local DAR chapter. And it is just one of our main priorities as the Rancho Purisma NSDAR to just do outreach to the local community and make sure that they understand all of the rights and privileges and liberties that we have as American citizens. And thank you so much for doing this proclamation every single year. It's extremely important, and as Madam Mayor mentioned, we do have free copies of the Constitution out in the lobby, and also just a quick poster that kind of just helps to define what the principles were laid out in our Constitution, the oldest Constitution in the world. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Albro, city manager's report, please.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Next slide. Just wanted everybody to know that we put up some new trees at Thompson Park and got rid of some cypress that were diseased and replaced them with some new oak trees. It would be nice in the future when they grow up. Next slide. Just want to remind everybody that school's in session. I'm glad to see that there's an agenda item for approving a Safe Route to School grant program, but be careful of the kids out there. It's that time of year again. Next slide. We will have 2 more workshops that people can give input on our transit system. It'll be tomorrow at 3:30 and 5 at the Dewey Center. We'll be giving out gift cards, and then you can get a free Colt ride if you call 736-777 and have that arranged. I also want to let everybody know that we put out a solicitation for the ADU pre-designed program, so it'll help streamline doing ADUs in the city. They'll be already done through the Planning Commission and ready to go. That closes September 30th. And finally, I had one more thing. Since we're doing the electric rate study, someone sent me this video, and I think it's a good video for us as a municipality that owns our own electric company. It's from 2020, so it's a little dated on the amounts, but the presentation that they'll be presenting will have updated numbers, so if you could, I'd like to play that tonight.
Building your online business? Go to Wix.com and set up your...
Power is expensive in California. Altogether, Californians pay 1.6 times the national average price for electricity. In PG&E's monopoly, the price is double the national average and rising. It's really hard to compare one power bill with another. The rate you pay any given moment can vary based on things like the time of day of the week, the season of the year, whether you've got solar panels or an electric car, how much power you use, your income level, and what kind of house you live in. But there's one factor that tends to be bigger than all of those things: what kind of utility you have.
There's different kinds of utilities, investor-owned utilities and municipal electric utilities.
PG&E is the biggest investor-owned utility, and one of the biggest municipal utilities is Sacramento's SMUD.
Generally, municipal utilities are 15 to 20% lower than investor-owned utilities in terms of their costs.
Here's why. All power providers have to cover 2 main costs: generation, the cost of making the electricity, and delivery, the cost of building and running all the power lines that get it to you. But the investor-owned utilities have one more thing they have to pay: profit to shareholders.
I said, I'm going to fund some CEO's vacation to Europe or a new boat or something like that. It's kind of what I feel like.
To grasp what this means to a typical household budget, we've come here, to the border. The houses on this side of me are in SMUD. The houses on that side are in PG&E's monopoly. If you take the average price they pay for a unit of power and the average amount an American household uses, the folks on
Yeah, I think the point is, municipalities, they pay a lot less, and that's a message I wanted to convey, and but it goes on and on, but that's all I really have for tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
And I'm sure later we get to discuss how much lower ours is than PG.
That's exactly right.
All right. Anything else? Any questions for our city manager? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to consent calendar. Consent calendar is open. If you would like to speak on items 1 through 9, you're welcome to come to the podium for 3 minutes, or you may call in at 805-875-8201. Again, items 1 through 9, consent calendar, public comment on consent calendar. While we wait to see if there are any calls or anyone wants to come forward, all items listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted after one motion in the form listed below. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the council vote. Any items withdrawn from the consent calendar for separate discussion will be addressed immediately before the second oral communications near the end of the meeting. Seeing no one rise and no one call in on public comment for consent calendar, we will close that and bring it back to council. If there are any questions or an item to be removed, Councilmember Starbuck.
I'd like to pull item 9.
All right, item 9. And make a note on our agenda to bring it back after written communications. All right, item number 9 has been pulled. Are there any questions on the remaining items 1 through 8? And if not, I'll entertain a motion. Councilmember Ball.
I'll make a motion to accept consent calendar minus item number 9.
All right, can I get a second for that?
I'll second.
Councilmember Vega made a second, so this is for items 1 through 8. Seeing no further questions, let's vote. And that passes 5-0. And we will revisit item number 9 just after written communications before the final oral communications. All right. Next item on our agenda is a presentation from the Parks and Rec Division on an update of current projects.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Again, I'm Jim Mendoro. I'm with the City and Parks Project Coordinator, and I'll be presenting an update tonight on all the parks and recreation and capital projects. Cool. So as we can see here, the Parks and Recreation Division has quite a few capital projects underway, as you can see here on the map. And I'll run through the status of each one of those. Here's the dehumidifiers again for the Aquatic Center. And these will be installed as of now on Thursday. So this project is started this past week, disconnecting the old and be putting these new dehumidifiers this Thursday, and that's the plan. College Park Prop 68, complete renovation project is in the final plan checking stage by the city, and then we'll be requesting for proposals for installation. We'll be advertised in a few months, and then to the city council to be awarded. The shade structure and restroom that was approved by the council members, by the board, has been ordered. Here we have the Pioneer Park, the Babe Ruth Field. This is the plans for renovation of the whole field itself, and hopefully the RFP will be, by the end of next week, should be submitted to purchasing for bidding purposes. So you can see the green is grass, the yellow is going to be all the mixed dirt inside in the field, and then the kind of purple, I guess, is going to be decomposite granite there, and the blue is going to be a planter area. So we're going to have that going on hopefully in a couple of months. We have the library here. We are doing this proposal Plan B for design. The consultant RHA right now is in the planning stages of getting this all put together so we can finally put it out for a bid proposal for RFP. The bottom right is the Plan B, and that's just for the outside reading area.
and everything else will be renovated. The parking lot will be expanded, of course, and the little carport for the Charlotte Mobile, bookmobile. Next, the HVAC at the Recreation Center. The contractor has submitted the design and plans to Building Department Division, and hopefully we'll get that back in a couple of weeks with an approved permit for them to start work on this project here. River campsites, it is submitted to purchasing for the bidding process, so we're just waiting for that. Next one, Ryan Park. We've proposed this, also an RFP to purchasing right now, and what we're doing is, in the red is the existing AC asphalt sidewalk around, but that's all gonna be removed and placed with concrete to make it ADA compliant. And then also it's good for maintenance purposes. The green area is a new concrete for the typical food trucks that are parked there, because that's really all broken up. And then the blue right there is we're gonna put all what we call class 2 base, because a lot of traffic goes through there in time, and save the city some money on watering grass. So that's out for proposal right now. And then John Manville, we have the building permit, so that also now we're able to submit the RFP to purchasing, and it's going to be in the for the bidding process as well. So that's good to go. So that's the updates of the latest what's going on in the parks. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for that update. A lot of good things going on. Any questions for Jim? All right, thank you for that update.
Thank you.
All right, now is an opportunity to speak to the council on any matter that is not on the agenda. So if there's an issue with the city you'd like to speak to that's not on tonight's agenda, you're more than welcome to come to the podium for 3 minutes, or you may call in at 805-875-8201. 805-875-8201. All right, seeing no one rise and oh, there's the phone ringing. We won't close it just yet.
You've reached the Lompoc City Council meeting. Did you want to provide public comment?
All right, we'll give you a chance to call back in. Now just wait for the transfer.
I'm going to connect you.
If you would like to call back in, I just need you to stay on the line while we transfer you internally. And if you decide to hold off, you do have another opportunity at the end of the meeting to call in. At that time, you only have 2 minutes, though.
You've reached the Lompoc City Council meeting. Okay, it shouldn't. Let me try this again if you don't.
Hang on.
Call me back
think we're having a phone issue? No. Normally it rings.
You could just turn on your speaker and let them speak from your phone.
I don't know why it's not.
If they call back, if they're patient enough to call back. Yeah, it'll be great when we get the upgrades.
Could be stage fright. I was nervous the first time I called in, so.
It could be stage fright, okay. I don't think it's stage fright. At this point, it's absolutely frustration. We're even doing our own internal testing while we wait to see if you call back. All right. All right. Put them on speaker from that phone. You are live.
I apologize. You're on speaker now.
Finally.
You have three minutes. We will start the timer. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, city council members, mayor, my name is Chris. I live on Crown Circle, and our backyard is West Maple. And there's about 15 of us that live on Crown, and backyard is West Maple. West Maple is made up of a big rock wall, and on West Maple there tends to be a lot of trailers that park there, and with those trailers that park there, they tend to accumulate a lot of property and trash, and we made several attempts with the police department to see if we can get them moved after a few days, but they just build up more trash, and we're trying to find out a way for either our HOA to get a petition to maybe get signs on West Maple, saying no overnight camping. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right. Again, we are having some major upgrades to our system that will happen during the month of November. So after the last meeting in October, for 6 weeks, this room will not be available because of all of the upgrades that we'll be putting into place that will help us address some of these issues. So we apologize. All right, seeing no one else rise and no one else call in, we will close oral communications and bring it back to the agenda. Item number 10 is appointments. The first one is appointment of a City of Lompoc representative to the County Advisory Library Committee. And Ms. Blyle, if you will come to the podium and let us know about the change and the recommendation.
Hello, Mayor, council members. Thank you for considering this tonight. Our previous person who was on the Library Advisory Committee for the county has served for about 14 years, and she was ready to retire from that, and that was Alice Down. So she was great, and she actually found somebody to take her place so that we could still have a really great representative for Lompoc. And that's Kara Carucci. She works at the Lompoc Museum and is a big supporter of libraries and Lompoc, and we're excited to have her on board if we can get her appointed.
Thank you so very much for that. And I do want to say, the reason I had you do this is I really want to thank Alice 14 years of service representing our community at the regional level is very impressive. And on top of that, you're right, she did go out and identify somebody who had the same level of passion. And I know Kara's passion because I get her monthly emails about the museum's book club and the reading that they offer up and support, and that those books are always available at the library as part of it. So Kara really does care about reading and supporting the library. So I'm happy to motion that Kara Carucci be our appointee to the County Library Advisory Committee, and would look for a second. Councilmember Ball.
Happy to give you a second.
All right. Let's vote. And that passes 5-0.
Thank you so much.
All right. Item number 11, Planning Commission appointments. Consideration of extending the term for the out-of-district appointed Planning Commissioner Steve Bridge pursuant to the Lompoc Municipal Code, Section 2.48.010C. The current term expires the 19th of 2024. The extension requires a majority of City Council vote. The length of the extension is the discretion of the City Council, and we will open the floor for discussion. Councilmember Starbuck.
Yeah, just a quick question. We're dealing with Planning Commission only here, but I've had somebody removed from a commission because they're out of district for me. A reason? I found out just this evening when I went to my box that I don't have a utility commissioner anymore.
It's the same reason. It was a temporary appointment, and it's been over a year. And there's several things that I seem to have missed. That was one of them.
Could he reapply?
Not according to the municipal code. Not for your appointment.
Not for my appointment.
Would you be able to provide any clarity on that, Mr. Malave?
The city clerk answered it, but he could reapply for the district where he lives, but not for your out-of-district appointment. That's just the rule that we have in the code.
And so for the clarity, since the continuation potentially of Mr. Bridge serving an out-of-district position on the Planning Commission would potentially fall under the same rule. So are we making an exception by considering that tonight?
No, it's only if the term expires, then they cannot come back and be appointed to the same position.
Which is why we're addressing it tonight.
Mr. Bridge, his term has not expired yet, so.
Because today is the 17th.
Right.
All right, so there's the technicality. Did that help? All right, so because it's 2 days before the expiration and my commissioner resigned, it came to the planning department's attention that they would be down to 2 members of the Planning Commission, and as a result, brought this forward to staff as a way to make sure that if we did not have an appointee before then, if we want to, we can let this expire, and those of us that have an open position, again, I just found out last week that my appointee is resigning after serving well over, I think, 12, 14 years himself, and so I'm in the process of finding somebody. So it would leave 2 commissioners on the committee if we didn't extend this, but it means they could skip a meeting until an appointee from any of the open positions returns at the next meeting. Councilmember Vega.
Are we ready to make a motion, or do we have another oral communication, or?
This doesn't have oral communication attached with it,
Just asking,
so
and
you can make a motion if you would
Thanks
like.
for the clarity. It's a very important position, and I'd like to make a motion that we extend the current term or current to for 1 more year, if that's possible. And that's kind of my motion. It's a really important position, and now after you spoke that you lost your commissioner, so we want this to move forward. So thank you.
Since it's an extension, might I ask you to consider only making it for 6 months, and we get through the elections and then reconsider it at 6 months?
Sure, as long as it doesn't expire and I don't fall into Dirk Starbuck's category. I don't want it to be a trick.
It's not designed to be a trick. None of this is designed to be a trick.
Okay.
All right, so you have a second from me for that extension. Any other questions or clarity? Councilmember Ball.
So I was just curious if there were any, and again, bear with me, is there a pile of applications for this position anywhere?
No.
Thank
There
you.
are
So I appreciate Mr. Bridges' service. It's important for us to keep functioning as a planning commission, so I don't have any problem supporting that.
Okay. Any more questions or clarity?
So are we confirming March 19th, 2025?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing none, let's vote. And that passes 5-0. All right.
Madam Mayor, did somebody second? I don't remember somebody.
I gave the second.
Thank you.
That's okay. All right, item number 12, and we have Chief Fallon here. The item is approval of the memorandum of understanding between the City of Santa Maria Fire Department and member agencies of the Urban Search and Rescue Regional Task Force 12.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Just wanted to give you an overview of what we're looking at here as far as the details that are composed in this memorandum. So as you said, the memorandum is between the City of Santa Maria and then the member agencies, which are the fire departments that make up our operational area minus Carpinteria. So as you can see there, of course, ourselves, Santa Maria, Santa Barbara County, Santa Barbara City, Montecito, and Vandenberg are the member agencies that make up the regional task force. So just for clarification, the regional task force is a group of firefighters from each member agency that are trained to urban search and rescue, rescue skills and abilities. And they come together to form what is the Regional Task Force 12. So there's 12 regional task force in our state. We are number 12, hence the name. That's how we make that up. So the objectives of our Regional Task Force 12, which are the objectives of every regional task force, but provide urban search and rescue skills in a variety of specialized situations. So some of those, just as an example, and they're certainly not limited to this, structural collapse, so search and rescue, shoring, trench rescue, technical rescues that would include high and low angle rope rescues. You would see those maybe in like mountain rescue, those types of things. Certainly in the structural collapse, things like earthquake response, extrication from machinery, vehicle, confined space rescue, and then water rescue, which we certainly experienced in winter of 2023 in our own city. So those are just some of the broad objectives that the Regional Task Force does perform when dispatched. So a requirement from Lompoc City Fire to be a member of the RTF 12 is to complete the California State Fire Marshal USAR tract. There's about 10 classes through the State Fire Marshal that are required to obtain that USAR certification. And then, of course, it's the regular maintenance of specialized skills in-house, and we do perform those in-house as part of our regular annual training and part of our training calendar. And then, of course, to build cohesion with the member agencies through routine training. So now we do an annual training that involves all of the regional task force, but there are certainly times within the year that we do come together with other agencies to practice these skills. The other thing that's required of our agency, as is with every other agency that's part of the RTF, is to have a daily availability to respond to the regional task force and to form up. So we roster these people on a daily basis depending on who is available and staffed for the day. And should that be formed up, then we will send those people to a rendezvous point and they'll form up that task force. So just as a few examples, some of the recent incidents in which RTF 12 deployed was the Montecito mudslides, the Paradise Fire, if you remember, up north. And then we had, since I've been here, probably half a dozen weather pre-positions where we will go down to whether it's North County or South County and form up as an RTF just as a pre-position in the event that we have a weather change. So what we're talking about tonight is the reimbursables through Cal OES. So you can see there in the top box, the Governor's Office of Emergency Services is committed to allocating that funding to the 12 Urban Search and Rescue Task Force to provide in continuing education, training, and mobilization exercises. So some of the things that we're seeing through reimbursements right now with Cal OES are our strike team response. We've, gosh, to date this season, probably since June. I think we're up to number 8 so far just in our strike team area. So we're seeing reimbursables on that side. That's just one example. And then, of course, the RTF 12 incidents, as requested by the operational area, will be reimbursable. But part of what the governor is doing now is providing reimbursement for continuing education, which is something new and something that we'd like to take advantage of as it involves our training. So the methodology for what the MOU is stating is Santa Maria is essentially acting as the facilitator or the conduit in which those funds will run through. So each member agency submits, we call it our California Fire Assistance Agreement salary survey, and that's a survey that we submit usually every June prior to fire season that outlines an hourly rate per position in the fire department. The state reimburses at that particular rate. And so we will submit those to Santa Maria. Santa Maria will act as the conduit. So when the training is performed or the RTF goes out, those funds will come to Santa Maria. Santa Maria will act as a conduit to then reimburse those funds to each member agency. Some of the stipulations of the MOU, as you can see there on one of the bullet points, is they will retain a 3% administrative fee upon receipt of those. The advantage for us, of course, is we can start to claim some of the USAR trainings that we're not able to do currently. So some of the trainings that we're doing in-house or some of the trainings that we're sending our people to, we can now include as part of a reimbursement through this new methodology. So the funding, it's just going back into the general fund, but it is funding, of course, that is appropriated annually from our training budget. So it will help with reimbursement of some of that. And 2023-24, not a ton, about $3,200 worth of USAR training that was paid from our budget that was non-reimbursed. This year to date, we're just at $3,000 of USAR training. So under the new MOU and the act of the governor, those funds will all be reimbursable going forward. And I'm happy to answer any questions. If anything jumped out, I just wanted to give you an overview of what the regional task force does here in our operational area.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Chief, I just had a quick question. Under fiscal impact here, the city attorney had noted the indemnification aspect of it. Are you concerned with that at all?
I will defer to our city attorney.
Concerned, but are you?
I'll tell you that, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but the other member agencies don't seem to be overly concerned about it right now. I'm not massively concerned about it, but in speaking to the city attorney, we thought that it was prudent for us to place that in the MOU just for your knowledge as we prepare to move forward.
I just find it odd that they wouldn't, that it played out like this here, but okay.
Councilmember Ball.
I also find it kind of interesting, and maybe I'll take a slightly humorous approach here. And bear with me, city attorney, I don't mean to put you on the spot at all, but let me ask you, the city attorney is suggesting that there is the chance that perhaps our firefighters might break something or something will go wrong. Tell us about why that won't happen.
So,
because of our staffing and they're qualified and they're not going to put us in a risky situation, perhaps.
Absolutely. Yeah, our firefighters are professionals, and so we take it upon ourselves to ensure that the training that we do is always safe, that we have the proper tools, that we're taking our time to practice that skill set. It's the same across our operational area. Accidents happen. They happen in our department. They happen in the police department. It's just part of public safety, but it would certainly be by accident, of course. Everything that we do is methodical and intentional.
Last question, these other cities that are now participating, do you think they are being more risky by participating, or are they doing the right thing?
I don't have any precedents to say that there was an incident that's occurred that would have prompted them to need to indemnify. So at this time, I would say that I haven't seen anything in the operational area that would prompt a need for that. But as I said previously in speaking with the city attorney, we thought that it was prudent for us to communicate that portion of the contract to you.
I appreciate that. Now, city attorney, you've heard what he had to say. Can you fill in any gaps there where you either agree or disagree?
The chief and I spoke earlier today, and we agree that it is a low risk, but we wanted to put that forward and inform the city council fully about the disagreement or potential unfairness of the one-sided indemnification provision in the agreement. But all the rest of the agencies are willing to agree to it, and Santa Maria is not willing to change the agreement. So it's just a question of whether the council is comfortable with taking that, what we agree is a pretty low risk.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Aiello.
City Attorney, so I understand, the insurance portion of it, in us being able to provide our own workers' comp and our own insurance for our vehicles and that. But just for clarification to the public and to make sure that I understand the overall risk, can you just explain, in a summary, the indemnification, and that way everybody understands what we're signing off on if that's the way the council chooses today?
Sure. So, as an example, at one of these training exercises, if Lompoc employees were to negligently do something that causes another person to get injured or causes damage to property, it's Lompoc's fault, but the plaintiff is going to sue whoever they can sue. So they'll sue Lompoc, they'll sue Santa Maria, they'll sue the other agencies. And what the indemnification clause provides is if that happens, Lompoc has to pay the legal defense bills of Santa Maria if Santa Maria gets sued. However, if Santa Maria does something at one of these trainings, Santa Maria employee does something to injure another person or to damage property, and Lompoc gets sued with Santa Maria because of that, Santa Maria does not have to pay Lompoc's legal bills. So it's a one-sided indemnification provision that protects Santa Maria, but does not protect all the other agencies that are part of this agreement.
And the difference for us, Chief and City Attorney, is that right now we're paying for our own training without necessarily having this in place, correct?
Correct. It's not reimbursable at this time, but the MOU is really just making Santa Maria the conduit in which those funds will be dispersed. There's a lot of administrative tasks that are involved in requesting reimbursement, and so we believe that by appointing one fire department as that singular department that can distribute the funds, it makes the administrative necessities of reimbursement easier.
So if the council was to weigh and say, it is cheaper for the city of Lompoc to consider paying its own training at $3,000 or whatever the cost is that was identified, I think you said, is it an annual?
Yes, and it's somewhat unpredictable. Some of the reason that the costs are low on our reimbursements that I demonstrated were that we haven't taken advantage of some classes that we probably could have taken advantage of if we had the ability to acquire reimbursement. So if we had access to more funding that's reimbursable, we would probably be sending our people to additional classes if that was available.
But I would think that the cost for the city to pay our own training is still cheaper than the possibility of an event ever happening and us having to indemnify the city of Santa Maria, and or vice versa. If it happened the other way around and we don't get indemnification, then we're going to be out probably more than $3,000 or $3,200. So I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of looking at that and thinking, is it, does it make financial sense? Why wouldn't we just pay for our own training or continue to pay for our training and pick up this risk?
I think the chance, the risk is that we are going to have to pay Santa Maria's legal fees, right? Or damages award if some incident occurs. And the chance of some incident occurring is probably quite low. Maybe a 1% chance that something like that might happen. And so you take the $3,000 that it would, is it $3,000 per firefighter?
$3,000 to date.
To date?
Yeah, so we've spent $3,000 to date on USAR training the cost of the classes vary depending on what class we're sending firefighters to. It could be anywhere from $300-400 up to $1,000 per firefighter.
Okay. So I think, in summary, the risk of going forward with this is very low. And in my conversations with the chief, the benefit is probably outweighs the risk.
Can you, maybe just so that I understand it better then, can you talk about the benefit then of us being part of this interagency?
Yeah, to your point about asking, could we pay for it? We could certainly ask for more funding next year as we approach the next budget cycle. And we may or may not have the funding available to do that. We do have a training line that is used for training, but in training in general, in all of the training that we do. So for us, as far as the benefits go, so just for context, we have one administrative person that works in the fire department, and she's tasked with all the administrative duties that encompass the needs of the fire department, along with myself if I'm able to help her. So for us, being able to use a single conduit that's able to handle all of these administrative fees, handle the perishables that are required for the training, and orchestrate those trainings for us, it makes it a lot easier based upon our staffing. If I had a full staff, probably wouldn't be as much of an issue. And taking into account what the city attorney said with the weighing the risk of that incident actually occurring, like I said, I don't have an incident that I could even cite that said this actually happened. So for us, for me, it's a bit of a no-brainer, and it's in alignment with the rest of our county chiefs that I work with, weekly.
Thank you, Chief.
Councilmember Ball and then Councilmember Vega.
So just a slightly different way to look at it, and just correct me if I'm wrong. So they're looking at City Attorney, I appreciate your estimate on there is risk, but it's relatively low. But you're telling me that there's a chance that if we did make some of these things reimbursable, that we could have a higher trained fire department going forward. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fair assessment, and when it comes to specialized skills like urban search and rescue that are perishable, skills that they're not necessarily doing on a daily basis, we're not always shoring buildings on a daily basis, but having the opportunity to train on these on a regular basis throughout the year, and particularly with our cooperators, it would, of course, enhance our skills and abilities and the service we can provide to the city.
Thank you for that.
Councilmember Vega.
Chief, who are the other members that are already on board with this within the county?
So every member agency, so Santa Barbara County, Santa Barbara City, Montecito, Santa Maria, of course, ourselves, hopefully, and Vandenberg have all signed, with the exception of us, are all member agencies of the MOU.
Are they all stepchildren where they have to indemnify?
They did not, sir.
They did not, okay. And I guess the other thing is, are they administratively already fully ready to take on the extra impact of running Lompoc's side of it? I guess it doesn't matter because you're saying there's 3% administrative fee, so you're not worried about it, but that's not going to change, right?
No, and with Santa Maria managing that administrative side, I am aware that they have a more robust administrative department that can handle those.
So basically, this is all clerical. Is that what basically is? Because the
the
training is still going to be the same. The $3,000 expense won't be there, but it's the administrative side that's actually going to be a relief in your estimation, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And for one final clarity, not only an administration relief, but the opportunity to potentially provide more reimbursement for more training that right now we aren't budgeted for.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Any more questions before we go to public comment? All right, we will go to public comment on item number 12. If you would like to speak to this item, you may come to the podium for 3 minutes, or you may call in at 805-875-8201. And we promise we will try not to hang up on you and make sure that it runs efficiently. The last time I started talking, the phone started ringing, so I just thought I'd throw that test out there. All right, seeing no one rise to the podium and no one calling in on item 12, we will close public comment on this and bring it back to council for either further discussion or a motion. Councilmember Ball.
I'll make a motion to approve the MOU as stated.
Right, and
I'll second.
Councilmember Vega seconds. Let's vote. Awesome, you're ahead of the game. Let's vote. And that passes 5-0. All right, item number 13, consideration of electric rate design report and adoption of resolution number 6701, parentheses 24, to update certain electric utility rates and rate structure effective October 1st, 2024. And we have a team of people.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members, members of the public and city staff. I'm Christy Donnelly. I'm the Management Services Director. And I am up here with what I hope is going to be our final discussion on this for a little while. We are looking at asking the council to consider the attached electric rate design report with proposed increases to electric utility rates and adopt resolution 670124, establishing maximum rate and charges for electric services for the fiscal years 24-25 through 28-29 to begin effective October 1st, 2024, and to adjust annually thereafter, starting July 1st, 2025 through July 1st, 2028, and implement the attached rate adjustment for October 1st, 2024, and increase rates for the remainder of fiscal year 24-25, or provide alternate direction. That's a mouthful. Just want to remind kind of where we've been over the last year and a half or so. Back in April of 2023, council approved an emergency rate increase of 30%, and we started to see our cash impacted in July of 2023. We began to see a gradual, mild recovery of the cash reserves. I brought updates, I believe in October of 23, January of 24, and then June of 24. And then back in August, just a month ago, we had Mark Beauchamp from the Utility Financial Solutions came and presented a cost of service study and presented a few options of what we can look to consider for moving forward. Received council direction, and he is now coming back to go over the detail. I want to remind council and the public that prior to the emergency rate increase in April of 2023, the last cost of service study had been in 2008. And our last rate increase prior to that was in 2011, or 13 years prior. In that amount of time between 2010 and 2023, there had been a 38% CPI increase. So inflation had grown 38% in that amount of time. And then we add on about another 3% in this last year, and we're looking at about a 41 total percent inflation rate since the last rate increase. So Mr. Beauchamp is going to come up here now. He's from Utility Financial Solutions, and then he's going to make this presentation, go over the details, the numbers, and so forth. And then after his presentation, Bob Cross, Brad Wilkie, and I, along with Mr. Beauchamp, will be available for questions.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here again. As Christy mentioned, I was here, I think it was August 6th, and in that meeting, we went through the long-term financial projections, and we provided several alternatives. We also reviewed the cost of service study, and the purpose of that meeting was to ask for inputting your guidance on what to do with the rate design process. And part of that also included the customer charge and what to do with that. And what I'm going to do tonight is just go through, just summarize what we did on the 6th of August, and then get into the actual proposed rate adjustments. Now, one of the things I do want to mention is, last year, you had that emergency 30% rate increase, which what happened here was not unusual. It happened in all over the country because of what happened with the war in Ukraine and the unexpected rise in fuel prices. And one of the things that we put in place as part of this rate design proposal is to ensure that doesn't happen again. And we're doing that because we're putting in what's called a power cost adjustment, where as power costs go up or down, they get passed on to customers through this automatic mechanism. I would probably guess 80% of electric utilities around the U.S. have something like that. If you look back 10 years ago in California, virtually no one had it. Now, I would probably say half of the utilities in California have a power cost adjustment in place. It's probably the number one thing to maintain your future financial stability. And so I just want to say that that is part of this. I also want to mention with the power cost adjustment mechanism is there's good and bad to it. The good is the financial stability of the utility, but if the power cost adjustment is not implemented correctly, it can lead to fluctuations up and down for customers. So to prevent that from occurring, we put in place what's called a 12-month rolling average. So if power costs shoot up in a month, only 1/12 of that increase goes the next month, and then the next month another 1/12, and so on, to try to smooth out these ups and downs and valleys in the power cost adjustments. All right. So, and I'll get into that in more detail as we go through it. Now, again, one of the things, what you're looking at here is a summary of the financial statements without any rate adjustments. And if you look at the total capital improvements projected over the next 5 years, it's about $71 million. And we're anticipating all of that being bonded for. And when we looked at the financial statements, we can tell that your system currently is aged. It's 61% depreciated. The industry average is about 50. So it would make sense to me that your capital improvement program is going to be rising. And on top of that, you have the electrification and the enhancement of the infrastructure to be able to support the infrastructure for electric vehicles. Now, because those capital improvements are being bonded for, the issue then comes in. If you look in the middle, it says debt coverage ratio. Oh, there you go. Thank you. It says debt coverage ratio. And because you issue what's called revenue bonds, you have to maintain certain bond covenants. And if you fall below those bond covenants, you're in technical default on the debt. So basically, without rate adjustments, you're not going to be able to get any debt to do these improvements because nobody will finance it, because you're going to be projected to be out of compliance with bonds. That's one issue. The second issue is over on the right. You see the projected operational cash balances, projected at $3.2 million at the end of 2025, and then in 2028 fall negative. The minimum level of cash, the bare minimum, should be roughly $5 to $7 million at a minimum. You can see that we're well below that, and we're falling negative. So we offered the council basically 3 different scenarios. One, I believe, was a 7% increase. Another one was 4%, and the third one was 5.5%. And the council felt that the 5.5% was the best choice of the three. So the rate designs were developed to achieve these projected rate increases over the next 5 years. So we had 5.5%, 5.5%, 5.5%, and then 2 years at 4%. Now, the other thing is we discussed is the staffing for electrification of the infrastructure. And one of the scenarios we discussed was to do it all at once and bring staff in, or to onboard the staff over the next 7 years. And the council gave us a direction to onboard the staff over the 7-year period. Now, by doing that, with these rate adjustments, what you see, the first thing is the debt coverage ratio. We are above the minimum coverage requirement that we feel is needed, which is a 1.4 minimum. And you can see that throughout that period, we're exceeding that minimum target. The same thing with projected cash reserves with this rate track. The minimum cash and then the projected cash balances, we're staying above those minimum cash reserves. Now there's actually a third target that we look at. And it's not really a target, it's more of an upper boundary, because the defining revenue requirements is not an exact science. So we define the minimums with the coverage ratio and the cash. And then the upper boundary that we don't want to exceed is what we call an optimal operating income target. All right, so we try to keep the rate adjustments within those two parameters. And we do that to try to accomplish two things. One, to keep the utility financially stable, obviously, but also to minimize as much as possible rate impacts on customers. All right, and so that's why we put that upper and lower boundaries. Now, if you look at this rate track and the rate adjustments, that bottom table, it identifies the rate impact on the average residential customer each year from this rate change, and also compares the bill with PG&E's. You know, right now, your average costs are roughly about $70 a month for the average residential ratepayer. If they were part of PG&E, it'd be almost $150. And of course, with this rate track, in year one, because of the way we design the rates, the average residential customer would see a $2.79 increase. In year 2 through 5, they would see $6.43 per month increase in their electric bills. So basically, at the end of this 5-year period, the average residential customer will be paying approximately $100 a month for their electric service. And this is on PG&E's current rate to be $150. And from my understanding, just today or this week, they got approval for another rate increase from the California Public Service Commission. So their rates are even going to be going higher than what we have here. Is there any questions about this before I move on? Right. Now, the other thing we reviewed is the cost of service results. And what the cost of service study tells us is how much it costs us to provide service to each class of customers, which is the cost of service column, and they compare that to the projected revenues from the class, which is the second column. What that tells us is approximately what classes are under or over recovering in the current rates that we're charging. Now, there's one thing that's confusing. I'm going to skip over this percent change column, and I'll discuss that in a few more slides, why I have to have that there. But basically, this column is the how much each class is under or over recovering. So in other words, a general service shows an average increase of about 5% to meet cost of service requirements. Residential, 8.6. So when you look at this table, overall, most of your classes are pretty close to cost of service, but any of the rate adjustments, we should focus more of the increases on the residential rather than the commercial or general service classes. The other part of the direction that we got from council was with the 5.5% adjustments, that no class would see greater than 7.5, and the minimum adjustment would be 3.5. So plus or minus 2% variation. And that's what we designed the rates to achieve. Now, the other thing that we discussed is having a customer charge, a fixed monthly customer charge, facilities charge. And it's most all utilities all over the country have a fixed charge. Here you had what's called a minimum bill. And again, if you go back 10 years ago in California, it was very uncommon to have a fixed customer charge. Most utilities had a minimum bill, just like Lompoc. But over time, because of certain things happening in the industry, most utilities now in California have a fixed customer charge. And the reason for that is when a customer has a meter installed on their home, the utility had the cost to install the meter. They have the responsibility to repair it, and to replace the meter, to read the meter every month, to send the customer a bill, and the cost of the service drop. Those are fixed costs that do not vary based on consumption. So even if they don't use a single kilowatt hour, we're still incurring those costs. And if we don't charge them those fixed costs, then all the other ratepayers in Lompoc have to subsidize that customer. So it becomes a fairness issue. And so as part of this study, rate design, we did put in a fixed customer charge. All right. Now, before I get into the rate designs, I just want to pause for a moment to ask if there's any questions about what we discussed back in August. Now, this slide shows a summary of the rate designs for the next 5 years. And what I mean by that is if you look at the top one, general service, in year one, they would have a 3.5% adjustment, and you can see 3.5 in year two, 3.4, 2.1, and 2%. Residential, which is the D1, would have a 7.5% in year one, 7.3, 6.9, 6.4, and 6.1. And you can see overall down at the bottom, the increases are 5.5, 5.5, 5.3, 4.2, and 4.1. So in the direction we got is 3 years at 5.5 and 2 years at 4.4. So, and you can see that the plus or minus variation is we met that pretty much with everyone except the mobile home park. We're just slightly above it in year 3. The upper boundary on that should have been 7.5. We got 7.7. And part of the reason for that is because that rate is fixed to the domestic. But you also see when you go to year 4 and 5 that they're actually getting less than the average increase. So I'm giving them a little bit more in year 3, but giving them less in year 4 and 5. All right. So this is a summary. I'm going to get into details of some of the major rate classes. Is there any questions about this before I move on?
Councilmember Ball.
I was probably going to ask this later, and I'm probably going to have several questions, but real quickly, would you mind just elaborating a little bit on the different customer classes?
Oh, absolutely.
Just so the folks can understand
Yeah, that's
who's
a great
in what
question.
category. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, general service A1 is what we call a small commercial type rate. In other words, it's going to be a commercial account but it's going to be a smaller level of service. Their average usage is about 3,000 kilowatt hours a month, all right? And so they're going to be a lot less than like a general service demand, which is going to be a lot larger customer. And also we meter and bill them differently because we have a demand recording meter. And I'll talk about that briefly in a moment. Then we have domestic, of course, that's residential. Domestic service mobile home parks. California has certain requirements when it comes to mobile home parks, and one of them is they need to be somewhat charged like a residential, but also that the mobile home park has to pass those bills on to customers. So what we did, and other utilities in California have done the same thing, to make it easier for them, we made a per lot charge, all right, rather than just a meter charge for the master meter. And it was just to make it a little bit easier for them to do their billing, all right. Then you have the street lighting and customer-owned lighting, and of course the street lighting, those charges go to the city. The customer-owned lighting is lighting that is owned by customers, like car dealerships, for example. That would be the customer-owned lighting. Then the general service demand, those are going to be your larger customers. Probably, you know, their average energy consumption is probably going to exceed 20,000 kilowatt hours a month, all the way up to millions, basically, kilowatt hours. And the same thing with your economic development rate, which is the last one. All right, does that help? Perfect. So this slide, I basically put this in, and initially I was going to say it really doesn't tell you anything, but it does tell you something. There's certain requirements in California that where every class has to meet cost of service. So the revenues from each class has to meet cost of service. Well, but there's one caveat to that, and that is that the community has what's called discretionary revenues. All right, when we looked at your what's called discretionary revenues, it amounted to almost $14 million. And what discretionary revenue is the city, the governing body, in this case the city council, has the ability to spread however they choose in the application of that discretionary income. And of course, what we did here is we applied it so that each class meets their cost of service requirement to be in compliance with the state rules. Does that make sense? But there is one thing too that I wanted to show you is, if you look at domestic service, out of that 14 million, almost 9 million of that discretionary revenues is being applied to the residential D1. And of course, consistent with the cost of service that showed that their rates needed to go up at a greater amount. Over time, that 9 million, theoretically anyway, should become more proportional and actually will decrease because we've given the residential class higher than the average increases. And part of it is because so that we're able to more equitably split that discretionary revenues. Does that make some sense? All right. California's got some rules that are unusual, I will say that, but it works. Now, residential rate adjustments. One of the things that we had discussed is the implementation of a customer charge. And if you look at the very top line, it says monthly facilities charge currently at 0. We're implementing a charge of $11. But with that $11 increase or put in place, you see what happens to the first block, the first 325 kilowatt hours? We're actually decreasing that rate from almost 19 cents to 16.4. So in a sense, we're giving them about $7, $8 back in that first 325 kilowatt hours. And you have about 500 customers in Lompoc that has pretty much zero usage. And to prevent this cross-subsidization so that other ratepayers don't have to subsidize them, what we're doing is they're going to be charged the $11. And basically, we're giving most of that $11 back through a discounted rate for the first 325. Okay, does that make sense? So as a result of that first year, you see the average customer that uses 324 kilowatt hours a month would see an increase of $2.79. All right. But in each of the subsequent years, the way the rates designs are structured, they're going to see a rate increase of about $6.43 in each of the subsequent years. The average ratepayer will. What we've done is we've shifted a bit more of the burden into the outer blocks, the last block. The other thing that what you see is in year 5 is we've eliminated a block. So right now you have 3. Our ultimate goal is to just have 2. And so basically the first 500 kilowatt hours would be priced at the same usage. Okay? Now, this is your largest rate class. So before I move on, I just want to see if there's any questions or concerns.
Councilmember Ball.
Just curious, so is the chart on the bottom, you know, it's showing 279, then 643 in year 5. That's monthly or annual?
That's monthly.
Monthly, right? And in year 5, that's a $31
Correct.
fee, right, for the cost fee. Is that cost fee, is that incorporated into the bottom chart at all? Meaning, is that $31 showing up in that 643 on year 5?
It is. So these are additive. So in other words, the average bill right now is about $70 a month. In year 1, it'd be about, rounding it, it'd be 73. Then it would go up another $6, so to $79, $80, then $86, and so on. So, and that's why if you go back to, whoops. This slide, if you look at the Lompoc average residential bill, that's with those adjustments in it. So it'll be about $100 at the end of this period. And you're still roughly 50% less.
And that is factoring in that cost. Thank you.
Correct.
Appreciate that clarity.
Councilmember Ayala.
On the slide that you had up right now, you don't have to go back to it, but you can.
Oh, this,
Is that what you're considering track 2? The one that you were on before? Go back.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is what you're considering track 2? No, it wasn't that one. It was the one that showed the debt coverage ratio.
Oh, yes, that is the one with that rate adjustment.
Correct.
So, yes. So in other words, overall, the average adjustment is going to be 5.5 for the whole system, but residential's would see a 7.5. Remember the plus or minus 2? So they're getting the higher end of it. I'm not sure if I answered that question sufficiently.
Yes, it's just because I'm seeing your numbers and I'm comparing them to the staff report, and I'm just seeing slight variation, so I'm not sure if your numbers were like slightly updated after this.
I think they might have been just slightly tweaked, yeah.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm
Oh,
following
I know what it
correctly and
is.
that your
Yeah.
numbers are accurate.
Yeah, my numbers are accurate. The reason you're seeing some differences is because I wanted a number there that showed 324. Because that was the average usage. So when that report was created, we just started at 200 and then we incremented it by 100. So what, 200, 300, 400? So I didn't have 324, which is the average usage. So I set the increment to go up by 124. So I know it sounds stupid, but I wanted you to know what the impact was on the average customer.
Based on the average customer, not on just a basic chart.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm following you.
Sorry about that confusion.
Step by step, yep.
Yeah, looking at it, it's like I want that 324 in here. So, okay. And then the general service. This is the small general service. Again, they're getting less than the average increase, about 3.5%. And what we're doing here is we're starting with a monthly rate of, which is going to go from basically zero to $10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So we're incrementing it by $10 each year, the monthly fixed fee. The energy rate, you can see, is pretty steady throughout this period, just slight adjustments, because most of the increase in this class is being run through that fixed monthly customer charge. So most in this class area is going to see about a $10 a month increase. Now, if you look at the percentage increase at different usage levels, you see that 1,000 kilowatt hours for this class, they're going to see almost a 5% increase. But at 3,000 kilowatt hours, we're going to see a 2.5. The average increase is 3.5. And that's because I put the increase in that fixed monthly charge. So the lower users in this class are going to see a bigger percentage impact, not dollar impact, but percentage. Is there any other questions? This is your second largest
Can you
class.
clarify that? You said, repeat that last sentence.
Yep. I know, that's a confusing one. Okay. The, because at 1,000 kilowatt hours, when we put in a fixed charge like $10, if you were to look at it on an average cost basis, pretty much everybody's going to see that $10 increase because I didn't do much changes in the energy rate. So when I take the $10 and divide it by 1,000, that is going to be about a penny per kilowatt hour equivalent. But if I take that $10 divided by 2,000, it's going to be a half cent. No, I'm sorry, a half of a half cent. 0.005. You see what I mean? That's why those percentages drop. But the dollar impact is still pretty much mostly going to be $10 a month.
Sure. So I guess the thing that I'm pointing out is that we're looking, at this point, we're looking at numbers. We're not even talking about impacts yet. So, and I'll follow up with a couple questions, but as I'm looking through these different classes, I'm just observing and wondering where perhaps a smaller business that is using less in 5 years, will the percentage of their bill be higher than a larger consumer? And that's where we have an equitable discussion.
Yeah,
perhaps.
their bill will be less than 1,000 would be less than 3,000.
Correct. But as a percentage increase.
Percentage increase, you can see that what we've done with this rate design, percentage-wise, we've given them a higher percentage increase.
Yeah.
But the dollar impact is still going to be less.
Sure.
That makes sense.
So technically, a smaller business could see their bill go up a higher percentage than a larger
Percentage-wise,
business.
that's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. But one thing you're pretty much assured at 1,000 kilowatt hours, they're going to see about $10 a month. So. Then the general service demand rate. Now, this is the one that has a demand charge. And what a demand charge is when the metering that you have measures two things on these customers. It measures their kilowatt hours, and it also measures what their peak usage is, that demand. And we have to build our infrastructure to handle that peak demand that the customers are creating on our system. That's what drives the need for investments. So we have that demand charge in this class, and in the winter, your current demand charge is $3.35, and we're proposing about $1 increase in that winter demand charge each year. And the same thing with the summer demand charge, about $1 increase in that demand rate. And by doing that, it's reducing some of the pressure for increasing the energy rate. So overall, they're going to see about a little less than a 5% increase again, consistent with cost of service. I do want to just, if I jump a few years into the future, those demand charges are becoming very common for all customers, including residential. All right. Not to this level or that amount, but they're becoming very common for all customer classes. That's something that in the future, utilities are preparing themselves to implement. So with that, is there any questions at all about this, and what we've done and what we proposed?
Councilmember Ball. So I just have two scenarios that I'd love to just play out. And again, this is just so, I'm still layman's terms here, so maybe help me wrap my head around it. One of my biggest concerns, and I think you may be able to show that this may not happen, but on the residential side, or anyone that would be paying a fixed monthly fee, maybe it starts at $5, $7, whatever the amount was, it went up to $31. I think my fear is that, let's take a scenario, some of the poorest folks among us might be on a limited paycheck, a senior paying their month to month. My concern is over a 5 or 7 year window, with us doing all the math, is that we've had a 30% increase that this council did in an emergency way. We're going to have 3 to 5 to 7% yearly increases. It's going to total up to another 20-25% increase on just the rate part. Plus, there might be that monthly charge for those that use more energy or have a bigger bill. Again, my fear is as a percentage increase of their bill, it's a smaller percentage increase when they acquire more, which I can appreciate. My fear is that someone on a fixed income or those that have very little among us, is there a chance accidentally that in 5 or 7 years their bill as a percentage increase has actually gone up quite a bit, meaning their $70 bill is now turning into a $110, $120 bill. Now, I know there's a bunch of numbers, and maybe you can talk me out of that. My other concern is that same argument with our smaller business community, and maybe you can articulate on those two categories.
No, those are excellent questions, and it kind of brings in a social type considerations in the rate designs. And the first one I want to just discuss is the low income. Low income in the relationship to energy usage. There is, low income uses slightly less average energy use than a average residential does. But with the low income, they're all over the place. Some are higher than average users by far. So when you design rates with the thinking you're going to help low income, in many cases you're harming a lot of the low income. So one of the things that utilities try to put in place is, and I think you have the mechanism with the system benefit charges, to help them through different programs, be it energy efficiency programs or so they use less to lower their bills, or through the system benefit charges to actually help them. But it's difficult when you start trying to design rates. I think last time I talked about where I live, Michigan, and the fact that during the winter 20% of our population leaves. Well, it goes to Florida or Southern California, and if we don't pay that fixed charge, then all the other ratepayers who have to endure the Michigan winters have to subsidize me. And you have 500 homes that don't use anything, and that I kind of think of as me. They're somewhere else, and so by not having that fixed charge, you're actually giving them a benefit, and they certainly can afford it. At least I think they can. So the low income is not. I'm not I'm here to help guide you, and to tell you the good and the bad of anything that you're considering. When it comes to social type policies, that's where I need to just help tell you the positives and negatives. I can't tell you that you need to do this because of social policies. That's a choice that you need to make. Okay.
Just like to add to that a little bit. If you recall, 2 or 3 or 4 months ago, the conservation program brought a item to you to increase the low-income electrical assistance program from, I think, $9 a month to $18 a month. And the conservation team has been very active in soliciting eligible customers to that program. So that $18 would offset a significant amount of this. And there are several customers that don't even get the $18 a month because they don't spend it. So they would be, all the $18 would be able to be covering that. And that's also another program that we hadn't had an increase in a number of years. So that we could bring that back, depending on how the program is funded, to look at that as on an ongoing basis more frequently than we have done in the past.
So I appreciate that, and I might have a follow-up question, but now let's talk about the second half of my question, which has to do with the impacts on perhaps the smallest part of our small business community.
Yep. The general service, if you, and I don't have the actual dollar impacts here, but probably for 1,000 kilowatt hours, the way I design the rates in year 1, they're going to see about $12 a month increase, all right? But if you go to 3,000, even though the percentage is 2.5, they're still going to see a bigger increase than that $12. They're going to see 14, 15. But they're not going to see as big percentage-wise, but the dollar impact's there. But that's going to be about $10 a month, roughly, for most of those smaller general service accounts. And, you know, before, I will say this, before the implementation of this fixed charge, remember I said you have fixed costs to serve each customer? That if you don't charge it in the customer charge, you have to recover it. So you recover it through the energy rate. So when you put it into the energy rate here, it's going to the larger users and the smaller users, but the larger users are paying more than they should. So because they're subsidizing that fixed fee, in a sense, to the smaller commercial accounts. So what I'm trying to do here is to rectify that issue with fairness. All right?
So I appreciate all that, and I'll maybe follow up. And the last question I have is about, and again, this is a can of worms, but because we're talking about power and energy, for years I've heard it from people, why can't Lompoc ever do solar? And the immediate response is, we have our own utility, it doesn't make sense, we don't want to lose customers. But now I'm learning that we have roughly 500 customers that don't use hardly any energy. Is there a chance some of them have gone off grid on Amazon to get their own solar power? I'm just curious, why would we have so many customers not using power? And the second half of that, now that we're talking about instituting fees to recover cost, is there an opening for an updated conversation, perhaps, where solar gets a fee and someone in Lompoc that really wants to use solar and give back in their own way might be integrated into this conversation?
You bring up, again, that's an excellent question, that utilities, especially ones that I call are in ISOs, independent system operators, like CalISO or MISO or PJM, or what it is like, you take solar, for example. On the power supply and the transmission side, because in a sense that's a pass-through, and that's not really how, even though I know you own generating units that sell into the market, but that typically from a solar standpoint, when they give us the energy back, we're just buying it from them. We're trying to emulate the market. But there is an area that we do that isn't covered by market, and that's the distribution system. When you have, this gets a little bit harder to explain, but let me give it a shot. The average residential customer has what's called a load factor of about 20%. And what a load factor is nothing more than if you took a customer's monthly usage and divided it by 744 hours in the month, you got their average usage, right? That as a percentage of their peak draw, which typically occurs at 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, is called a load factor. The average residential is about 20%. So in other words, if they have a 2 kW average usage, they have a 10 kW peak usage. All right? Does that make sense? Now, the reason I bring that up is that that ratio that I just talked about is for the past 100 years how we have set residential rates, okay? And for the most part, it worked. I mean, but what we had to do was we had to take customers and put them into groupings of common usage patterns, such as residentials. We considered them common usage pattern, homogeneous group. Same thing with small commercial and industrial. And then all of a sudden, and it worked until maybe about 20 years ago, we started seeing some issues with it. Because people who implemented energy efficiency programs, their load factors improved. So instead of 20%, they're at 30. We're overcharging them. Then, in 2010 through 2015, we started seeing solar, where the load factor declined to 10%. Now, the reason that becomes important is when it comes to the distribution recovery, that infrastructure has to be sized to handle a customer's peak. And whether they have solar or don't have solar, believe it or not, their peak demands are virtually identical. Because the peaks for residential are occurring at 7, 8 o'clock. The peaks for solar customers are occurring at 7, 8 o'clock. Because solar's starting to drop and they're coming home and using their energy. And so, but when we have all our distribution recovery rolled in that kilowatt hour rate, and they're not using a lot of kilowatt hours, but we still need the same infrastructure, we're undercharging them and we're shifting it to other residential ratepayers. That is the piece of it that we need to recover. Power supply, this is kind of almost bad to say, but we don't care. Especially now that we got a power cost adjustment. It's a pass-through. It's out of our control. That's 75–80% of our cost is out of our control. We have control over 20 to 25% of what the electric rates are. That makes sense? That's part of the reason why I put in the power cost adjustment.
So I don't want to, because 100 questions will be here till tomorrow. So let me just slim this question down a little bit.
Yep.
Within all of your expertise working with other municipalities, figuring out how to thread the needle with great rate update,
Yep.
has solar been a part of discussions in many other cities that you've put together rate studies?
Pretty much every one.
And how, maybe give me a quick, if Lompoc was to start talking about working with folks that want to do solar in their town, but not losing that cost. It's fair that we should recover cost and at least break even. Maybe you can give me some examples of how that's worked in other cities.
One of the things that we hope to be coming back to you in the next few months is a revised net metering policy. And now I want to mention that to describe the different methods, okay, and the strengths and weaknesses quickly. Right now, or initially, you had what was called net metering. What net metering is you have a bidirectional meter that records the customers, how much the customer is taking and how much they're giving back. Historically, when net metering started, if a customer took 1,000 kilowatt hours from you, but gave you back 600, they were only billed for 400 kilowatt hours. Logically, that makes sense. However, that 1,000 kilowatt hours is a recovery of that demand or capacity cost. So by netting it, it under recovers our distribution charges. So what utilities move to is something called net billing, or a lot of them in California implemented the net billing as their NEM 2. And what that is, it goes by so many different names, like inflow, outflow. But if you had 1,000 kilowatt hours that the customer drew, they're charged that on your current rates schedule. So if you're charging 15 cents a kilowatt hour, they pay that for the 1,000 they take. The 600 they get back is credited against their bills based on the avoided cost value, which is driven by the market, which is out of our control. All right. Now, that's what we calculate. We take that to the governing body, and you may look at it and you may say, this is all well and good, totally understand it, but we want to incentivize solar. That's a decision you need to make. You may want to add to it or keep it the same. It's all about what you choose to do, all right? Now, there's a third method, and that's where others in California are trying to move to. It's called a buy-all, sell-all. And what that means is it can be complex because, in theory, you need to have metering on the solar array as well as the bidirectional meter. And the rate of the utility, any energy that's used at the home, whether it's from the solar array or the electric utility, is billed at the retail rates. All the energy produced from the solar array is credited at the avoided cost value of solar. Now, even though I'm a rate analyst, I'm not supposed to have an opinion. I don't like that one, and I'll tell you why. The only reason the inflow, outflow, or net billing doesn't work, or isn't perfect, it works better than the net metering, it's because we don't have our rates structured correctly. If we put in time of use rates, demand charges, we're going to recover our cost under that net billing. The only reason to go the other step is because we don't want to fix the rates. So, but that's something, down the road, you're going to probably be faced with time of use rates and potentially residential demand. All right. Long answer, and I apologize.
Any more questions for our consultant or staff before we go to public comment? All right, thank you. Stand by. We will likely have more questions after public comment. If you would like to speak to item number 13, you might come to the podium for your 3 minutes, or you may call in at 805-875-8201.
My name's Ron Cockrell. I live here in Lompoc. I've been here for about 36 years. Awesome presentation. I appreciate it. But there were some questions that came up in my mind and my thoughts, and Councilman Ball brought that up about the solar. Have you looked at what has happened to the utility rate for the customers in California who are using solar, and did a comparison with where we're going? Because in the past, it was good to live in Lompoc because we had some great rates. And my question, sir, would be to the council, are we using fossil fuel to provide electric support to our Lompoc citizens? If we're using fossil fuel, and it is the governor's desire to go totally electric, then what would happen on the offset if we have to go to electric and no longer fossil fuel, if we're using fossil fuel to provide electricity to our customers? So the question would be, looking at the out years of California going total electric, would it be a good time now to help the city get involved in that program, buy batteries for the inverters, because the you can actually have an inverter system that will be able to offset the high demands during the evening time. So there's a lot of infrastructure questions that need to be answered, and you did good, sir. You gave us a good comparison. But my biggest concern would be if we are using fossil fuel to generate electricity, and electricity seems to be the way, solar seems to be the way to go, would it not be good to be able to have a new review of what the out years look like if fossil fuels become something of a history that we no longer go to? And I really appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Jim Mosby, Lompoc. So to answer one of your questions about solar, about a decade ago, the city of Lompoc, as many communities, were required to meet a 5% demand or to reach out to the community and needed that. So they provided incentives for people to put in solar. And we met our 5% demand over about 4 to 6 years, and that's why you see these solar arrays on houses. Santa Barbara County Housing Authority did that. Walmart did a big chunk, but a lot of houses did it as well. So that was the answer why you saw solar. We met our 5%. They pulled back the net metering, but the net metering is the incentive for people to invest big chunks of money. At that time, solar was $4 to $5 a watt. It was very expensive. They did offer rebates, $1 to $2 a watt to help people to do this, but the city had to meet a requirement, so that's why they reached out and did what they did. Another answer to a question you had before, why rates weren't raised earlier. We had a $25 million reserve fund. We met our 100% reserve requirements. We had the money in the bank. So that's why rates weren't raised 4+ years ago. In fact, that's why there was a 3% reduction, because we were getting more money in than we had a policy for it required for us. So getting back to the study that's up here, there's a big, huge variable that's missing in this study, and that is the increased usage. As people start going and electrifying, electric water heaters, electric heaters, you're going to see that number go way up, in fact, significantly. A 40-gallon electric water heater, it's using about the equivalent of the monthly average right now, operating 3 to 5 hours a day. You're looking at about 11.4 kilowatts a day. So we're 300 kilowatts just for that electric water heater. So as we start electrifying, we want people to electrify, but that variable wasn't used in here. It was flatlined all the way across. CARB anticipates a 75-76% increase in electrical usage over the next 10 to 20 years. So that variable needs to be calculated in there. Do your rates really need to go up so much? Do you want to go up too much where people say, hey, I'm not putting that electric heater in. I'm not putting the electric water heater in. And that's what will happen if you see this. But people's rates, you know, at 324, one of the reasons why we're so low, we don't have air conditioners. If you go up to Reading, where they do have air conditioners, they're averaging, what, 900 kilowatts? Our highest day of usage, I believe, was December 10th. Not in the summertime, but the wintertime, because people are using their heaters. So when you're using your gas heater, as we go away from gas to electric, you'll see a significant increase. But all your numbers up there didn't have that variable. There was no increase in usage in that variable that they flatlined across on your page. So you might want to have the consultant come back with that input put in there so you can see what happens if we sell 20 or 30% more power over the next 5 years. What happens? Do we really need to raise the rates as high as we are going to? Or are we going to discourage people from electrifying, which we want people to electrify? Thank you.
All right, seeing no one else rise and no one call in, we'll close oral public comment on item 13 and bring it back to council for discussion. Councilmember Ball.
So I appreciate that both comments, and the first question had to do with fossil fuels, and that's a big unknown. Obviously, we're moving towards the electrification of California, but in the slides we saw that there is projected to be a significant amount of capital investment in our local infrastructure. So maybe, I'm just curious if anyone can elaborate on, is there variables within the, with all that spending, at the end of $75 million spent over 5 years, what do we have to show for that in the bigger context of the questions of electrification in California?
So you mentioned both questions. The first question was about whether we're using fossil fuels. And as part of Northern California Power Agency, we have investments in non-carbon emitting resources. We've been a member of the GEO plant since it was built in 1983. Totally carbon-free, generates power from steam that comes out of the ground. We have an interest in the Calaveras Hydro Project, totally non-carbon emitting. That is a very, very valuable resource because we can ramp it up right at 5 o'clock at night to take care of the ramp up of everybody coming home from work. The city is also part of the LEC plant that's in Lodi, which is a gas generation plant. It only started running in July this year. And the reason it didn't run until then was the significant supply of industrial size, utility size solar that's out in the deserts that reduce rates, power rates, market rates at some points in time in the day to $50 a megawatt negative. So the ISO is paying people, charging people for making power. So our historical last couple of years of power consumption is vast majority of it is coming from non-emitting resources. And the mandate by the state is to have 100% of our resources non-emitting by 2045. A big chunk of that $75 million you mentioned up there is to improve the capacity of our system, our distribution system, so that electric water heaters, electric heat pumps, car chargers in the house can be installed, because right now, based on some other studies that have been done in other NCPA cities, one city estimates they're going to have to spend $300 million on upgrades to their system so that they'll be ready for people to do those kind of changes in their fuel choices. We're about half that size, so with a hand wave, we probably have 75 or maybe even $150 million of improvements we have to do between now and probably 2040, maybe even 2035, to allow for the electrification to happen. And right now we have about $45 million of net assets that are part of our distribution system. So we're going to have to move that from 45 million to 200 million. And that takes money to be able to do that. The second question, ask that again.
No, I think Mr. Mosby brought up a good point. And again, both sides are projecting here. We have no idea what's going to land, but is there a chance that because more people are using a higher percentage of electricity, because everybody's getting electrified, everyone's bill's going to go up considerably because they're using a higher percentage of electricity? Is there a chance that we got the rates wrong, that we've raised them too much because people are going to be paying way more because they're plugged in?
The power cost adjustment that's being proposed, if the amount of solar that's being installed statewide and in the West continues to grow at the same pace that it has been growing, then our market power will be such that that power cost adjustment will be negative. There are going to be spikes. We had a spike in December 22 that caused most of the issue that we have right now. But that power cost adjustment can go up, but it can also go down. And that is a factor of how much solar and how much non-emitting resources are being added to the system over time. Just to give you an example, our peak demand in California this summer was about 50,000 megawatts. The expectation in 2045 is that's going to be 180,000. So it's going to go up by a factor of 3. So we have to be able to manage that. And we also just have to keep in mind that the PUC just raised PG&E's rates about an average of $6 just last week. And PG&E says they're going to probably be increasing their rates another 3% for the foreseeable future. So as we do our 5%, we will stay considerably lower than our neighbors just in Mission Hill, Vandenberg Village, and our customers have a competitive advantage because of that.
Thank you. I know you said you didn't want to have opinions, but I'm curious if we can grab one out of you on any of this.
No, this is, it's not an opinion, it's, I wanted to mention how that financial model was built. And one of the things we looked at was the number of electric vehicles in Lompoc and the average energy consumption, and then we did grow that over time, so there's a significant growth factored into the modeling. Now, with respect to missing the mark, so to speak, when I do a long-term projection, I know historically we're pretty close in year 1, 2, and maybe even 3, but in years 4 and 5, I'm certain of one thing and one thing only, and that is I'm going to be wrong. So, I mean, it's just something that we have to look at again. You know, we made the best assumptions that we felt were going to happen. And I know you have an excellent staff. They're going to keep track of what we projected. And as time goes on and years 4 and 5 become year 2 and 3, we're going to have a better picture of if we hit the mark or if we missed it up or we missed it down. So,
Appreciate that honesty. Thank you.
To the question regarding moving away from fossil fuels, the other factor that this rate increase is factoring in is the fact that we do own our generating facilities, and one of those facilities, as mentioned, is the Lodi Energy Center, which is a natural gas fast start turbine at the moment. When that turbine failed early, we, as members of NCPA, chose to replace it with a turbine that is capable of a hydrogen blend. And we, as NCPA, have received infrastructure dollars from the federal government for hydrogen hub conversions. The Lodi Energy Center will receive money for that. We've already received the federal allocation. We're waiting to see what the California allocation is so that we can build the process center to take Lodi wastewater, convert it into hydrogen, to put it into the system that currently can handle a 45% hydrogen blend. Siemens, who provides that hydrogen turbine blend, has guaranteed us that within 7 years it can become 100% hydrogen blend. So it is a system that we helped build in 2011. We're still paying on, and if we can't do this conversion and get the federal and state dollars to help with building that system to make an existing plant not dependent on fossil fuels, then we will have a debt that we're paying for and obligated to pay for. Whereas instead, by moving forward on a hydrogen conversion, we have a facility that we own and we'll get a longer life out of after we finish that debt and can provide clean gas production. And therefore, all 3 of our facilities will be seen as recyclable and renewed. So just to answer that question, we are moving forward even on the entity that we own that is using natural gas to not be dependent on natural gas within 7 years. So there's that. All right, any other questions for staff or the consultant, or do we have a motion on the floor? Mm-hmm. We did public comment. Yeah. Well, so I know I did this last time because everybody is reticent to do what we absolutely need to do, which is make sure that we have the funds to improve our system for electrification, to cover the debts that already exist, and to plan for the future. But Councilmember Aiello's light went on before I said anything.
Well, no, I was just going to ask, maybe it would be helpful to go through the actual list of staff recommendations, and that way everybody fully understands what the vote or what the motion on the table would or could be.
Sure. So let me scroll back up to the top of the staff report, since it has more details than our agenda. All right, so we're considering a rate design that will begin in 2024 in October and go through the end of July 2028. That it will have a, scroll down to it, a average projected adjustment. Each rate area will be different, but on average will be 5.5% in 2025, 5.5% in 2026, 5.5 in 2027, 4 in 2028, and 4.0 in 2029. It will allow us to cover our debt ratio just above and in some points exceeding the recommended 1.4, if I remember correctly, and would have our projected operational cash balances above the recommended 5 million? 2.5. Varies depending on year. But it keeps us in the green and allows us to do things that we need to get done and get the finances in place in order to move forward on much of the electrification. So if we take staff recommendations based on council direction, we would have a 5-year schedule that is a potential rate increase of $3.90 monthly on residential in 2025, $4.12 monthly in 2026, $4.34 monthly in 2027, $3.33 monthly in 2028, and $3.46 in 2029. Does that help? Did I leave anything out that you were wishing for clarification on? That's in whole. I mean, the recommendation is to accept the rate recommendations put forward under rate track 2.
Okay. And that covered, I'm sorry, I was trying to follow, but that covered the establishing the maximum rate, or the establishing the, what was it,
Oh, the minimum charge? Yeah.
the minimum charge.
Exactly, there's also that. Sorry, I forgot about that because I scrolled down to be specific for you. Implement the rate adjustment and increase rates for fiscal year and set a minimum charge. Councilmember Ball?
So for me personally, I'm still looking, I know we've got to do this, I know this is going to be hard, but I'm still having some trouble, and for me, I just wish there was a little bit more nuance. My fear is mostly on, again, I know it's just a few dollars here and there, but I'm playing it fast forward to 5 years out. There are people that are living paycheck to paycheck. There are businesses that are struggling every single day, and I know go through the motion to just do this, but I don't think that we've talked enough about some of the impacts and the subtle differences on some of those things. And maybe that's more in the social realm, and we don't necessarily need to go there. But that's something that still concerns me. And then I guess the other thing that I'm still a little bit torn on, and I go back to something that our consultant said, it's important for us to cover the state mandated cost of services. That's right. I mean, we can't go against that. I guess what my question is, for a little bit of clarity, is how arbitrary is coming up with the estimate of what cost of services is? Now, I know that's a super loaded question, but I'm curious.
That's a very legitimate question. And, if you go back 20 years ago, we had what was called Berry curves, which are a little bit more like a dartboard. But nowadays, we actually have load research. So we have the usage patterns for each class of customers. So the studies are far, far more accurate. And then the modeling, of course, is just, we know how your costs are incurred, where your costs are being driven in CAISO, in transmission, and so when those costs are incurred, we allocate it to the classes based on that load research, which in the end, we even go back and balance it to the actuals and make sure it's reasonably close. I mean, and that's, it, cost of service, there's still some art, but it is mostly science now. 20 years ago, it was mostly art.
I appreciate that. And this isn't necessarily directed at you, but the other thing that makes me a little bit hesitant, and again, not everybody wants to have solar, but some people do want to contribute for their own reasons to the greater good. And I'm concerned that because this is a 5-year plan, we may not have a discussion or necessitate a discussion on how that is integrated into the bigger picture. And again, I just go back to, if we have the right to recover some costs by putting in a fee to make us break even in one category, why couldn't we entertain doing something with solar and making sure that we have a break-even point? But again, maybe I'm going out on a limb.
No, again, those are, again, a great question. We're not addressing the solar issue here. The solar issue is something that we're going to bring back to you probably in a few months. You know, there's some really good points made by the speaker earlier where he talked about, you know, people making investments and, you know, we just can't ignore the fact that they relied on that price signal we sent. And so how do we deal with that? I mean, we can't just change it and pull the rug out from under them, you know, but we can change it for new people going forward. But we just got to be careful with the ones that relied on our price signals. And those will typically be addressed in that net metering policy. So, but that's not part of this.
Councilmember Aiello.
So I really think, and I know that this is a hard decision, it's a hard to even evaluate, and I appreciate the consultant's you know, explanation of everything. I've tried to follow it the best I can, and I feel like I do have an understanding over what we've talked about over the past few months, and especially from the August 6th meeting. I think we gave direction, this council gave direction, and I think that you did a good job of coming back and spreading that out and playing that into the entire formula. I also believe that our founding fathers in this city, in this community, did a great job of setting Lompoc up for having its own utilities, and I think we've been blessed by that, and we continue to be blessed by that, by having lower rates than our, you know, neighboring cities. I know that PG&E is much higher, and I think it's black and white on paper, but if you live in any of the unincorporated areas, or you've paid even commercial utility bills in other cities, which I do, I know the impact that those cities have versus what Lompoc offers, and that is just a blessing. That is great. I think it's unfair to bring up the fact that future electrification would increase revenues, and somehow that's supposed to make us feel better. It's really one-sided, because not also bringing up and considering that there is plant upgrades that would be required. There is investment in the plant that would need to be made in order for us to be able to electrify these people. So it's almost like saying, like, let's not increase rates because electrification is going to happen, so it's going to take care of itself. Well, who's going to take care of the actual equipment that needs to be replaced, and who's going to take care of planning that? So I don't think that's a fair statement on itself. I think we have asked for them to come back. I think this track does come in line with what this council asked and what we all considered and vetted out as possible increases, and how we could fairly move across placing these increases, because they are needed. They are needed. In the long run, a 3%, 4%, 5% is better than having to do, again, a drastic increase. If we don't do it now, we're gonna have to do it at some point in time. And in consideration of that, I move that we move forward with the recommendation based that I feel that all my questions have been answered, and I have given it a lot of consideration and a lot of thought, and I'm following the numbers, and I do believe that the staff report does do what we have asked them to do, and this has been ongoing, and the rate study, I think, is fair, and we've all seen those numbers. So that would be my recommendation.
As difficult as it is to raise rates, I think for me, one of the key statements in the staff report is that subsidizing customer classes is substantially eliminated. And so the fact that some of our lowest income residents are paying to subsidize those that aren't using any energy is a concern. And by eliminating that with the new rate structure is important. The fact that we are putting in a flat rate charge for those that aren't using any power so that they aren't being subsidized and can help us move towards solar, because that was the same thing that happens when someone goes on solar, is that they no longer pay into a system that we still need to maintain and provide services in, even to their home, as they're using potentially 100% solar. So them still paying a flat fee to maintain the infrastructure in case they ever need power delivered to their home once they're on, is part of that solution, right? Is making sure we're not subsidizing those that have chosen to move to solar, that aren't necessarily living in their home 100% of the time and not using power, and that we're taking that burden off of our low income by this new rate structure. I think the other thing that we need to do as we move forward and continue to improve our budget and have a strong and healthy reserve is partner with agencies and nonprofits that help those, and do our subsidy programs that we're doing to identify where our community members might be struggling or where our business community is. And again, we as council in the future can always go back and say, this was too high and we need to readdress it. But past years did not maintain and fulfill the rate structures in a way that helped us prevent having to do a 30% jump. And so I don't ever want to see us get caught in that. And so I will give you your second on this staff recommendation for rate adjustment. Councilmember Ball.
So I don't necessarily disagree with all that. I think from my recollection, and maybe I missed it, I was tired, maybe, but I thought that from our discussion that we had kind of a general sense that maybe there would be a monthly fee, $5-10. But from my understanding, I don't remember a big discussion where small businesses in 5 years are going to be added $600 a year on top, because that's what it says. Now, that's not even the rate. That's just the fee. So from my perspective, that's where I'm a little bit hesitant, where somebody on the residential side, in 5 years, they're paying an extra $31 a month, and that's not even the rates. That's just the fee. And some small business in 5 years is paying $600 a year, $50 extra a month, plus the extra electrification, plus the 30% that we put on them, plus the 20 to 25% that we're going to do now. So that's what makes me hesitant on this. I know we need to do the changes, but I'm looking at the equity of it.
I want to just, if I can address that. One of the things with the small general service is we actually gave them the lowest increase of any of the classes. So when you look at, whoops, I did it again. If you look at the very top one, that's the one you're referring to. You can see they're at 3.5 each here, rather than the average of 5.5. And then we dropped it to 2 after that. So they're actually seeing the lowest increase of anyone. And that fixed fee is something that, you know, we need to be careful with them. I totally get that. That's kind of why we phased it in the way we did. Going 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, where the 50 is pretty much cost of service at that point. But by doing that, the energy rate stayed lower, which helps keep everybody's percentage adjustments lower. So, and of course, because of the way we restructured it, and this is what you're seeing, when you look at percentage-wise, you see that variation in the usage. All right.
Is it fair to say that someone whose bill has gone up over time, that they may be incentivized to just find ways to cut corners or to cut their power draw? And the reason I keep going back to this is 5, 10 years ago, you couldn't go on Amazon and power your whole house. People can do that now. And so at what point are we creating such a restrictive update that people are incentivized to just go figure it out in a different way? So we don't even break even.
I keep saying you have great questions because you do, but I want to address what you just said by looking into the future. And I kind of addressed that a bit with time of use and demand. Like when we send a price signal, like right now, it's 28 cents approximately per kilowatt hour. The reality of it is probably 15 cents off peak and 35 cents on peak. Once we start sending those price signals, then if they don't want to pay the rate, they'll shift it, or they'll purchase energy efficient appliances or put in different things to help them to reduce their usage during the peak periods. That's to their benefit, that's to our benefit, that's to society's benefit. And that is ultimately what we're trying to get to. So we have that off-peak rate that's lower, cheaper. People can charge their batteries, their EVs at night when wind is running, basically, and it's very inexpensive. And that's the ultimate objective. But we're not in a position right now to do that, but we're getting close here in Lompoc to offer that. Go ahead.
And the city the last 3 or 4 months has been going through a process to evaluate going to a metering system that will allow us to do time of use. Right now, the meters that we have installed are very, very good. They're very accurate, but they don't give a price signal to us or the customer of when our costs are high or our costs are low. We are looking at an advanced metering infrastructure system to replace our meters and the infrastructure behind it so that we can start looking at different rate structures that will give a pricing signal to a customer to shift away from 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night to other times of the day where they have capabilities of doing that. And that will help both the customer and the utility because it will, over long term, reduce our cost of the most expensive power, which occurs between 5 o'clock at night and about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, to other times when it's a lot less expensive. Several utilities that have AMI have EV charging rates that are hugely expensive at 5 o'clock at night when you come home and plug in your car. It gives a big price signal to a customer say, I'll plug it in at 10 o'clock at night when I go to bed instead of plugging it at 5 o'clock at night when I come home. That benefits the city because we're not adding to the load at the most expensive time of the day and adds to load where the costs are relatively minor. So the customer gets the benefit, the city gets the benefit.
I think that was a great explanation. I really appreciate that. Your mention of meters, updates on meters, so that we can have this variability, or at least meter it. Am I to assume that's included in the CapEx
Yes,
for infrastructure?
it is.
And how soon might that take place?
Well, the The ideal plan is to have that as the first part of a long-term plan for changing our whole entire system to be able to be electrified by 2045. But to get there, we need data. And having an AMI system implemented will give us that data. That's why we're going through a extensive RFP process to identify the best solution for the city that's cost-effective and provides that data. That is getting to the point where we'll probably be brought to council in the next 4 to 5 months, and we would likely be able to say, let's implement this at the beginning of the 25-27 budget cycle so that it can be in place to allow for evaluations of these rates before the 5-year rate setting authority is over.
Thank you for that.
Councilmember Vega.
Couple of questions. Councilmember Ball, I think it's absolutely, you had some excellent questions here. We have to worry about the ratepayers and the fact that we have a lot of senior citizens and we have fixed income here, and I don't want them belittled and lowered to a point, yes, we need increases, but to a point where they have to apply at City Hall and ask for forgiveness or to ask for a lower rate because they can't afford their bills. We don't want to belittle people like they're saying that there's programs there. Yes, they can come and ask for help. We have nonprofits. It's all that. We have the power to restructure all of this to make it work for the city and for the residents. The 30% rate increase, half of it was disingenuous and half of it was necessary because of the fear factor, in my opinion. I think what happened was were these rates based on the current 30% increase? They were. So it was already increased, and you went above that when really it shouldn't have been raised at all, except for the fear factor that there was a gas crisis and there was a utility peak crisis. So in that factor, I don't know that was factored in also. Also, we have people that are still making payments or not for the past utility bills that were off, and it'd be nice for everybody, since the public needs to have a lot of input in this. It's so important that I wish more people were here from the public or would call in because this affects them. It's very important, but it's also the hardships that were there for people that were in arrears for utilities. It'd be nice for us to get an update also. As we try and do economic development or whatever we're doing here to increase businesses, we don't want to put them out of business, because one of the things that I hear here is that the public is supposed to be so grateful that our rates are so low, but they were investors. They were investors in getting lower rates. It was paid for by the taxpayers, by the city, so why do they have to always be grateful because PG&E is so much higher? It's a different entity. Shouldn't even be a comparable. Lompoc was always known for having lower rates because they own their own utilities. Yes, there is an increase in bills and shoring up the reserves and everything, but we still need to make sure that it works for our residents here. Otherwise, we're not doing any good by raising it and just putting money in the coffers here, but we can probably work with a consultant to make something work that works for the residents, but we need more input. For us to make this decision without having the public's input to find out what the hardships are out there, I think would be a little bit premature. But again, Christy, if you don't mind, I'm not sure if you know if there's people still making payments on arrears and how this affects them. And maybe if it's substantial, or maybe it's just a few that are left, if you don't mind.
We do have several that are still on payment plans. I don't have the exact number of quantity, but I do know that at June, we had just under $1 million of payment plans on file. That is significantly lower than what it was when we first had to go to payment plans. I'm going off of memory, but I do believe it was between $2 and $3 million at that time, that when we first had to go on to payment plans. So people are paying their bills.
But we don't know the amount of people still paying.
I can pull a report.
Well, no, I was just wondering if it's 100, 200, 300, in general, just ballpark, so we know, because you guys are asking questions so the public knows. It's not for me, it's for them.
I put that number in our weekly update, and I just honestly don't have that number off the top of my head right now. So
Okay,
I would need
but
to
I'm
pull
curious,
that for
because
you.
there's people out there with hardships, and then this thing was supposed to be implemented October 1st. It may be premature no matter what we do. So unless we know exactly who's paying and who's going to have the hardship, and I just think we have to make it work for everyone, and that's just because the city wants it.
The payment plans, I can tell you, when we first put people who were in arrears after COVID and after all of the pause on disconnects and people got behind. When we brought people back and put them on payment plans, they were for 24 months. So they're still paying on those. Many of them are continuing to pay because it hasn't been a full 24 months yet.
You know, Christie, also, you know, when we did this 30% increase, and I understand that we're all part of this decision-making because we didn't want the reserves to be eaten up in case the worst-case scenario happened. And then we did the extension based on still a fear factor that we could use up all our money or we haven't met our reserve limit. Do you not think that that was a little bit strange? That I know you guys had it pre-planned to get that increase so that we could get the rate structure to be above that 30% that wasn't in there because of the past that we hadn't had rate increases. Was that all part of the plan to try and recapture some of what you thought was supposed to be increased prior?
No, there was no plan. The bringing of the 30% was driven completely by the cash reserves that we were below and looking at a projection of what the trends were showing, which if you look at this rate study that we have presented here in the design, it supports that we needed 30% because right now the revenue requirements are showing 35.5% on average. 30% we've already done. The additional 5% we're looking at completing now.
So the 30% plus these rate increases, if you were to add the 30% in, it's not just what's here on the piece of paper, because that 30% is a factor.
And we showed that at the rate design presentation in August, that it was stated that it was part of the 30%.
I understand, and I'm saying this for the public. It's not for all of us who think that, oh, why are you asking that question? Because it's already been told, and half of the times, you know, people can't remember. This is so they know what's happening here, so they understand it. So I appreciate that, but I'm glad you answered my question. I appreciate it.
Okay, so there is a motion on, Councilmember Stockman.
Could you repeat that original motion?
Sure. It was to accept the staff recommendation for the Track 2 rate increase, as well as establishing a minimum charge for a meter service if not using power.
Okay, which recommendation is that? 1, 2, or 3, or all?
Let me go back to the agenda. Sorry, I'm on a different page of the document, so I have to go back and find it. It is Attachment 1 is item 1. Attachment 2 is the resolution establishing the scale, and item 3 is the rate adjustment and the increases for the remainder of 2024 going into effect with the adoption of the new rate structure. So it is item
3
1,
is
2, 3.
actually the same as 2.
Yes, it's just a repeat of,
Got it.
yeah. All right. So the motion on the floor is to accept staff recommendation and have a second. Any other questions? I did. Councilmember Ball.
So I'll just be honest with you. I appreciate so much all the work that our consultant did, all our staff. There's no arguments here. We know we have a challenge. We know that we don't have enough money coming in. I think the thing that makes me continue to remain hesitant is that one question where and again, you answered honestly, and I appreciate that, where it had to do with a smaller business. Even though it's a percentage or a dollar amount, technically, as a percentage, they're going to pay a little bit more than someone who's a bigger consumer of electricity. And that's okay. But it reminds me that perhaps this council has a lot more input and should have a lot more thoughtful input into some of the nuance of some of this. And perhaps, going back to Councilmember Vega's saying, and there was a flow chart on one of your first slides, and it talked about, one of the things listed was customer impacts. And again, we're hopeful that someone would show up, but I'm worried that we're making a knee-jerk checkbox here, and we haven't necessarily talked to the entire community. We haven't talked to the edges or the fringes, the people barely getting by or the businesses that are trying to figure it out. And maybe we have, but I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that communication. I haven't heard about that outreach at all. So as is, I'm doubtful on this. I think there's more input that we as a council could have. I don't doubt that it's that smart people did smart numbers, but there's a lot more input that this council could have to give philosophical direction, social direction, impact direction upon the future of our community. And so I feel like we've just had a couple of hours, and again, thank you for humoring me with all of my questions, but this is going to have serious and massive impacts. Even though it's not a huge number and we're cheaper than our neighbors, it will still have impacts across many different classes. And unless this community understands why, I'm fretful that we're going to ding our business community without thinking about it. I'm worried that we're going to ding the poorest among us without really thinking about it. I was raised, again, this is not everyone's position, but an edict has stuck with me, even though I'm not the most religious person, but to whom much is given, much is required. And as leaders in government, it should give us pause to look at nuance and to look at details so that we can make the best decision based upon those impacts to help our community forward. And it's not a decision that just impacts us in a few months. These are impacts in 5 years, and 6 years, and 7 years. So I don't disagree with the need for us to make a change. I just wish we had a little bit more time to get feedback and to have a little bit more input. That's where I'm at.
Councilmember Aiello.
I was just going to say that I completely understand everybody's reservation, the comments, the impacts to the community. I get all that. I guess that's why when I get my packet, I do my best to really fully understand the decision that I am tasked with making for my community, even if they don't show up. It is not an easy decision to make, but it is our job to work through it and figure it out. And one of the most frustrating parts about being on this council at times is the fact that there is all these hesitancies that come about, but I'm not hearing any alternative motion being placed. I'm not hearing any alternative workout plan, any alternative idea. All I'm just hearing is I'm uncomfortable making this decision. And that makes me uncomfortable because I'm not saying let's do what I'm saying. I did my homework and I followed the graphs and I looked at it and I followed it each and every time we discussed it over the past year and a half or whatnot. And so I'm basing my decision on the information that was fed to me and the consideration of the impact on the public. So for anyone on this council to just say, I'm not comfortable making this decision is a failure unless you're following it up with an alternative. That would tell me that you've actually done your homework and that you actually have considered, okay, I'm not comfortable with this. This is the alternative staff direction. But unless we walk away today with giving staff additional direction, where do we go from here?
Councilmember Ball.
I appreciate that. Maybe I can provide some clarity so that we won't assume that only one of us up here does their homework. So here's the deal. If I say, look, I don't like it, so with the residents, I want $5 a month and nothing more. That's it. Or with the businesses, I only want $10 a month and nothing more for 5 years. That will skew every single number that's on this chart. So it is not realistic for me to make a motion up here to say, look, let's just make it $5 or $10 and let's check the box. Every single number up here will change. Yes, I did my homework. There are alternative methods, but we're not talking about the full impacts of that.
Councilmember Aiello.
But we've had the opportunity to give that feedback to staff and to the consultants. So we could have said that to them, which again, whatever model they're bringing was based on those discussions. Roll back the footage and look at the discussions and consider what we as a council gave direction to. So there have been opportunities for us to do that. Jeremy, you could get hot and bothered about the fact of what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I'm the only one that did my homework. All I'm saying is don't sit there and say, I'm uncomfortable, and make it seem like because I've put a motion on the floor, and obviously I'm taking that because I put the motion on the floor, that I'm all gung-ho about raising rates. No, all I'm saying is, as your Council 1 district representative, I did my homework, and just know that I did not look at this and just say, oh, okay, check it off, staff has requested it. I followed it for the past year and a half, and I did exactly what I needed to do to consider and come to this hard decision. So I'm willing to entertain any additional motion or any additional direction by any one of the council, but it's frustrating when we just say, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable making this decision, and no alternative is provided.
I'm going to give Councilmember Ball the last comment, and then if there's not an alternative motion, we'll take a vote and see where it goes from there. Councilmember Ball.
Okay, so let's see how this goes. Did we discuss, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'll have to roll the tape because I maybe went cross-eyed on a long conversation, but did we discuss 5 years out in our last conversation that there would be a $31 charge and a $50 charge? Was that discussed in our last conversation, those specifics?
The specific, no. It was the implementation of the customer charge.
So we didn't, so to clarify, we didn't say, look, we'll double it every single, we didn't have that discussion. We talked about, and again, let's roll the tape, and we talked about some sort of fee. That's it, from my recollection. So again, this is a $31 and a $50 charge. It's not me saying, oh, well, gosh, we haven't. This is the report that we got today. We didn't have this information that there would be a $31 and $50 charge 6 months ago, a year ago, or even in our last discussion. Is that correct?
I think I talked about a range of a customer charge to begin that could be as high as $12, I believe I said, 11 or 12.
Did we have a thorough discussion on that doubling every single year?
No.
Okay, got it. So this is why I go back to, again, we've had time to discuss this, but there are new details here, and these new details are real-world impacts with real people. So yes, I will make a motion. I would like the same thing to come back to us, and I think there should be a $5 fee, not doubled every single year. And I think on the business community, the A1, it should be $10 flat. And I don't think it should go double every single time. Now, I also know, and I'm smart enough, that that's going to skew the numbers ridiculously, and that's going to make the rates go up. But that would be my motion.
If I could just add some clarification to what you just said. You know, if you said, just looking at the general service, if you said, I don't want $10, I want $5, all I would do is I would change the monthly charge to $5, and I would change the energy charge for that class up. I would still meet the same revenue targets in each year. It just, I'm going to be rolling it into the energy rather than the customer charges. So yeah, that's an easy fix. If that's
That's my
what you
motion.
want.
Councilmember Vega.
If I could add to your motion, Jeremy, maybe they could bring back some numbers that take away that mandatory minimum fee also, just to see what it looks like. Since we don't have a fee, so every time we add a fee, it's always subject to increase, which is the goal here. So let's see what happens when we add a fee, which there's zero fee right now. Let's find out and just have a discussion over that and see how that looks. That's kind of just an alternative motion maybe that I'm seeing if you're okay with.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with it coming back.
All right, so there is a substitute motion that is slightly unclear to me, other than instead of being a increase year on year, it is a flat rate of $5 for which
There's
area?
two categories. We have an A1 category, and we're looking at right now, what category is this? A1. So it goes year 1, 10, year
So
5 is 50.
Right,
The
but
other
we
one's-
actually have more categories than that. But you're saying, in
Customer
general,
fee,
you'd
though.
like to see, well, there's actually 5 categories, 6 categories, when you look at it. So, 7, thank you. So you're saying you'd rather see a lower flat rate that doesn't double each year is what you're actually recommending?
I think that's what I'd said.
Okay, because when you look at it, go back, keep
This
going.
one, oops, sorry, one more.
There's actually, yeah, that was the slide I was looking for. Go, no, the one where you had the list of the different rate areas,
One
the different
more.
classes, there.
There we go.
There you go. So in actuality, that was a sample. The general services A1 was a sample of what the rate scale was. And so you're saying you would like to see the rate scale change across the board, and where it's commercial, you'd like to see it be a flat rate of, and with residential being the domestic services, you'd like to see a rate of.
I think that's pretty
Okay,
clear.
I'm
yeah.
just trying to clarify because I wasn't quite understanding it. And I see my city clerk is confused as to what she's,
Let me show you, you see this slide?
Mhm.
This one right here?
Yes, sir.
This is an optional for residential. This produces the same revenues. And it's starting at 8 and then increasing increments of $5 over the period of time up to 32. We can easily adjust the energy and keep the revenues in each class the same as what I have here, is my point. If you give me the direction of how you want to see that customer charge, I can design rates to meet whatever revenues you need in each class. So if you told me, for example, you don't want the $11 customer charge, you want 8, and you tell me how much you'll allow for it to increase each year, we can go back and design that. Obviously, we're still going to cover the cost. It's just going to go in different components. The same thing, and I'm not so concerned about, whoops, the general service demand, because they're big users. You know, that $175 customer charge is nothing on their bill. But then you have the general service A1. You know, if you want me to start at 5 and increment it by $5 each year, 5, 10, 15, 20, I can do that. All I need is a direction.
So I guess I'm throwing out a rough number, and again, I don't think that this motion, my motion, is necessarily the best idea. I think it should come back with more feedback from the community and flush out some impacts, and then we can make a really solid decision. I just feel like with this new updated information and this new plan, this hasn't been a year and a half on my radar, just a few days, so I think a little bit more time and hearing from the community isn't a bad thing.
and I understand that. I'm trying to get some clarity so that the consultant and staff know what adjustments to make and where to make them. So you're saying rather than seeing a $10 increase year on year, you'd rather see it either not increase across each year or have a less of an increase, and where's your starting point? That's what I'm looking for, is to provide that feedback.
Yeah, I love stability, so I would prefer that year 1 had a larger number and that the year 5 had the same number. Does that make sense?
So if we started at 10, you'd love to see 10 every year, or if we started at 20, you'd love to see 20 every year.
Pick a number and simplify it. I'm looking at this through the equity lens, and I know this is frustrating, but this is where I'm.
It's not frustrating, it's clarity for staff so they can provide the next report to us. And so by saying pick a number, what I'm saying is, are you saying that for residential you want to start at 5 and at general service rate you want to see it at 10, but you don't want to see it year-on-year increase? That's what I'm hearing from you, and I'm just asking for clarity to make sure that staff hears that you don't want to see year 2 go to 20, that you want to see it remain at 10 if there's a service charge.
So I don't know how you want to
The
get
answer
clarity
would
from
be,
it.
yes, that's the direction I'd like to see
Yes.
come back on the next report.
Yes.
That's
So,
what I'm looking for.
Again, I don't want to pick the number because I'd love for them to just look for stability as their guidance here. So give me the same number across on both the resident. Now, maybe I'm misunderstanding. There's 2 classes that are getting a fee applied. I know there's 6 or 7 classes, but we're talking about A1 and the domestic,
Those are
right?
major ones, yeah.
Yeah. So these, I mean,
I
to
think
me, I'd love it to be simplified. Somebody that's projecting out, trying to build a business, it'd just be nice to know that, hey, if I don't turn the power on every year, it's $25, or every month, it's $25. Add some stability. Everything else is in flux. Everything else is unknown. We have only 20% of control over the rates. We have all of it. So let's add some stability to the system. That's all I'm asking for. And making sure that those that have the least are paying a little bit more as a percentage than those who have a little more. That's all.
If I could just put a little bit different context.
Sure.
Okay. Actually, the customer charge, by increasing it the way we're looking, that actually adds more stability to the ratepayers, because the variable cost is staying roughly the same, So they're just seeing that consistent adjustment. I need the revenues. How I get it, if I put in the variable component, then what's going to happen is they're going to see big increases during the high use periods and not much of an increase during low use periods, where this provides more consistency in the bills. And I could give you some extreme examples in Nebraska with irrigation, farming, and where this fixed charges, it was to everybody's benefit, utility and the customers.
So last discussion, I love the idea of a fixed charge. I didn't love the idea, and neither did we discuss a fixed charge that would double every single year.
And I totally get that. I mean, you know, maybe what I should do if I was in your shoes, I'd probably look at the direction for this rate to say start at 10 and increment it by $5 up each year. 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. We'll take it to the 50 late in a subsequent rate adjustment. That make more sense? Yeah, and we can easily do that. The one I really would even more feedback on is this one. If I start the general service at 5, that customer charge really should be higher in the general service than it should be in the residential. If I start them at 10, maybe I should do something similar, start them at 10, increment them also by 5. So they go 10, 15, 20, and do it that way so they're more consistent. That would bring this customer charge down a little bit, but just for consistency purposes.
So that was a head nod from you as something you'd like to
Yes,
see.
that'd be
All
great.
right.
And again, I'm flexible. I appreciate you hearing.
But they need a starting point. That's the reason I was asking for the clarity. Councilmember Vega, since this is the second on the motion,
It's up to you.
are you you're the second on this, does that work for you?
Yeah, but again, you know, what I want is, I understand as a consultant, you're trying to make the revenue stream still come out the same. But what if the revenue stream doesn't come out the same? I think that we should have that discussion also, because that is one of the variables. You know what I'm saying? You know, you added the 5 and the 10, but their goal here is to make the revenue stream come out the same. We have a couple of different goals that we want to integrate, and they're still talking about the customer charge because they're using a variable as far as usage to lower some people but not others. So we just need to have some clarification on it. I think sometimes if we're giving clarification, we're kind of beating the dog right now because everybody's tired. And I think that we should have this come back so we can have a discussion and be able to pay attention with clarity so we can understand this guy. This guy's very well versed. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. But I get the revenue stream, but we need a couple of other alternatives because the revenue stream that you're trying to meet your target goal may not work for us. And I know that's what you were hired to do, to hit this target, because we keep talking about lowering the rates or maybe streamlining the rates or whatever we can do to make it less, have less of an impact. But I just want to have an open discussion on where we're going.
It's not my place to respond to that, I'm sorry.
I got you, but I understand what you were hired for, sir, and I appreciate it. And you gave an excellent presentation. We just need to have a little bit more. I'd like to invite the public to come out for our next meeting when this comes to discuss. We need a little bit more input on this.
We have a substitute motion and a second. Councilmember Ayala, do you have any questions or
Well,
comments?
I just wanted to clarify something, and I'm okay with changing that monthly charge or that, you know, set charge, if that's what seems more consistent. But clarify for me then, because again, the goal is to make sure that we have optimal operating income at the end of whatever cycle, whether we're doing year 1, year 5, or year 7. Along with that, obviously, our bond covenants, in order for us to be able to meet that and be a city that can go out and borrow money to be able to do improvements on our equipment or whatever it is that we need to be able to meet those thresholds. And then 3, I was considering the equity amongst customers when we're looking at the rates. So my question is that if we do the 5 or 10 or whatever it is that makes everyone feel more comfortable, does that though then potentially increase if we're looking at the actual usage, energy usage? Because what I looked at was the energy usage, if you're looking at even A1, which we had up there a little while ago, or if you're looking at the domestic rates, the residential rates, that was staying pretty much the same throughout the 7 years. So that made me feel comfortable because I thought, yeah, you have that additional charge, but your actual usage cost was staying the same. So by us changing it, obviously, as Jeremy said, it does, reconfigure the numbers. Is it going to reconfigure the stability of those actual usage?
I do have the numbers, and I probably should have put this section in this slide rather than the one I chose, which is the dollar impact. For example, if you go to these general service rates, at 1,000 kilowatt hours in year 1, they see $13 increase. $13 in year 2, $14 in year 3, then $10 in 4 and 5. Fairly consistent adjustment. At 3,000, the upper boundary, they see instead of 13 at the lower boundary, they see almost 20. So it's $20, $20, $21, and then 10 and 10. So it's pretty consistent. They do see a bigger increase basically, dollar-wise.
So when we go low on that actual dollar amount, the usage does pop up a little bit. Yeah. So I'm not trying to make anybody, I just want us to actually understand that we do have to look at this and we do have to understand it. And unfortunately, we're tasked, that's what we signed up for. So anyway.
I do just want to emphasize one thing though. The age of your plan is 61% depreciated, and that's old. And, through this capital improvement program that's needed, you'll drop that 61% down to 39%. You have a newer system. I'm not going to say you're going to eliminate all outages or anything like that, but they will go down. And you're just going to have less unexpected things occurring. And fortunately for you, your debt-to-equity ratio right now is only 15%, which is very low. That means you have the debt bonding capacity to make these system improvements to that $71 million, and then you're going to be, I'm not going to say you're going to still need to do capital, and there's still going to be things that happen, but you're going to be in a great position at that point to move forward into the future. You're going to have a reliable infrastructure. I mean, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen on the generation and fuel side, but distribution-wise, you're going to be set.
Councilmember Aiello.
I was just going to say that since there's a substitute motion on the floor, my vote will reflect that I will support that because it's going to come back, and I support the continued conversation. And I hope that we're able to get a better understanding of the decision that we are tasked with making.
Councilmember Ball.
I'm going to make nice. I really appreciate that. And again, my whole thing here is to just do a little bit more due diligence on equity. I think you highlighted a really interesting point, and we can all land wherever we do with markets and rates. But somebody getting 1,000 kilowatt hours is paying, you said, $13. The person who's getting 3,000 is paying 20. On some of our layman's heads, it's, wow, that's a sticker shock for the person getting little, and that's a pretty good discount for the person getting 3,000 kilowatt hours. Well, that's great. So again, having a little bit more thoughtful discussion on the impacts of that person that's only getting 1,000 kilowatt hours but is having a jump, it might impact them more than the other person. So I want to have that discussion.
And what you described with the 10, 15, 20, you're going to see it kind of rebalance in a sense. 10, the other one might be closer to 30 in a sense. But
And my final comment is, the way I understood this is that in year 5, with a monthly charge of $50. It covers cost of service, and some small businesses may pay no more than $50 because they aren't using enough energy to see the additional rate increase hit them. And so this actually would be a bargain for them.
Yeah. Well, I think at the end of this, instead of 50, it'd be 30.
All right, there's a substitute motion on the
Ma'am?
table. Yes.
I still am unclear about,
So what the recommendation is that the exact same track two come back to us, but an adjustment on the general service rates and on
so
the residential
A1
rates.
and D1 only.
It will have I believe, some flow into the other rates, and those will fall out based on what is done to these two rates will have to be done to the others. But the indication is starting with the residential and the commercial rate.
So again, A1 and D1.
Start with those, but that it will see a change in the other rate structures for the same thing, but we're not dictating it because we don't know what they're going to be, but we accept that there will be a change. But start with these to see it at $10 with a $5 increase over each one. And as a result, we will see a change happen in the actual kilowatt hour rate change, and we will see it across the other rate categories as well. But to start with these two and
So
implement.
A1, D1 both start at $10 and remain flat or go
Increment
up?
by
Increment of $5 each for the year. And then I thought Councilmember Vega said he also wanted to see no monthly charge. Is that correct?
And what no monthly charges would do to the rates.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so that will be the change and the substitute motion. Councilmember Vega?
Just for clarification, this is just for discussion again, we're not approving
We
not
haven't approved
approving
any rate
rate structure or
changes.
anything, we're just going to have another discussion with possible action, is that correct?
The next time will be also the same scenario. We will be presented information. You will be given an opportunity to decide if any of those rate scenarios work for you, and if they don't, provide additional direction until we come up with a rate study that gets a council majority agreement on. Any other questions? Staff have clarity they need. Head nodding everywhere? Okay, great. Let's vote. And that passes 3-2. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your continued work. We'll see you again. All right. Did we have any written communications? I have
No,
to
ma'am.
do written communications first, and then item 9 comes before. All right. Thank you.
No, ma'am.
written
Nothing.
communications. Now we will do item 9. Item 9 is adoption of resolution number 670624, approving the types of programs and projects for which greenhouse gas allowances proceeds may be used. Mr. Wilkie.
I think I'll wait for the other council member to come back. I don't have a formal presentation on this item, but it'll be fairly brief. Do you think she'll come back soon?
She can hear you, so you can go ahead and start the presentation.
So, AB 32, which was the act that was put in place in 2006, set up the process for selling carbon credits. That the city, as a electric utility, gets free credits that it can sell. Those credits are mandated by the AB 32 for certain expenditures. And there's a list of those statutory expenditures that can happen. And there's also a requirement that says these things have to provide for reduction in carbon emissions. The last time that we made this update was, I believe, in 2012 or 2014. So this is just an update to that original resolution. recognizing the fact that we have many, many more opportunities for greenhouse gas reduction programs such as EVs, electrification, conservation efforts, battery storage, photovoltaics, either in utility-wide or community-wide. So this is just an update to the types of discretionary programs that we can spend the greenhouse gas proceeds on. And we've concentrated on most of the things that are in here are just giving us a little bit more flexibility, but most of them are things that we'd probably have to do anyway. So we're using the resources that are coming through from payments from other entities to do the things that we would otherwise have to do with the rates that are coming from customers. So the 7 million or so that is being generated by the greenhouse gas credits that we're going to be getting over the next several years are being proposed to be put into programs that are already things that we are mandated to do. So that, in a nutshell, is what the resolution is doing, is updating what we have been doing and will be continuing to do as a requirement for the greenhouse gas elimination by 2045.
So that demand for electrification, this expands what we can use those credits for to apply and prevent us raising rates to cover doing.
Yes, because most of the things that we have on here are those type of activities. There are some that are not really generating power or generating efficiencies on sales, but we have some. One of them is a elimination of some gas generation items that are in our substation. By eliminating those older units, we're taking gas that would otherwise be expended into the atmosphere out, and those they're called SF6, and those are things that we have in our transformers, our big transformers, and by trading out our transformers over time, we'll reduce those gases that are in those and take them out of the system, so they're not endangered by going in the system. But everything else is either generating new power sources that are non-emitting or providing for things that need power that are non-emitting, like electric cars or electric infrastructure in homes or businesses.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Well, I found it odd that we're doing a resolution on consent, and I don't think this is routine, but it does give me a second chance to address the carbon credit issue. Before, we had the opportunity to rebate. We've done it before. Mr. Albro, you were financing. I thought it was just under $2 million. We gave everybody, what, $150 credit on their electric bill. We're worried about $5 and $10 here, but now we've got twice the money, and I don't propose spending all of it, but, you know, a couple of $1 million. What's our account receivables? How much is owed in the electric?
That's a number I don't know.
I have it. Can you hear me on this?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, because sometimes you can't, because I don't always talk well into it. The account receivable as of June 2024, this is before we do our accruals. So it's not a final number, but it is a closes. We're looking at about 863,000.
Okay, that debt could be wiped. We could give everybody credit, we would have a buildup, and we could still have some money left. There's, once again, I think what this report is showing me is that the city gets all the benefits and the people that own the company are getting nothing. What we're doing is we're taking the money that people have paid up to this point of selling these carbon credits, and now we're going to reinvest it into what new customers get without paying in. Don't consider it fair. Whatever, however you make it logic. I think this would be a chance where we could clean up the accounts receivable, the people that are on payments. It gives all the small businesses some money. It gives all the residential people a little rebate. It's a shot in the arm. The people own the company. We work for the people. I don't know why we had such a hard time a couple of months ago deciding to do it, and we didn't. We voted to put all of these items on here that don't help the people now that have already paid. So all I wanted to propose is maybe bring this back. We could consider some type of a rebate for all the customers, and we could leave the city with a couple of $1 million in here to do these little upgrades, just to be fair to the people that own the company, i.e. the guy that pays the bill every month for his electricity.
So the statute from AB 32 provides for rebates to customers. It's in a non-volumetric manner. So it would have to be $150 per account. So that would be for a large...
I just threw 150. We've only done it once.
I know, I'm just using that as an example,
Right.
but...
I mean,
that
to
would-
Vons or any of the big grocery stores or Walmart, 150 bucks is nothing.
Right.
To a small business, 150 bucks, 150 bucks. To a guy at his house, man, that could be almost 2 months' worth of electricity. So, yeah, I think we all get what it is. It's just not listed on this resolution or in the staff report to, hey, pay your customers back. It's not there.
But it's statutorily allowable, so it doesn't need to be in there.
Yeah, but statutorily, it isn't stated here, so I wanted to make sure that's why I pulled it and let the rest of the council know. Now, if the council wanted to take action on it and say, hey, you know what, I think rebating our customers would be a good thing. Last time I brought it up, it wasn't a good thing. We agreed to put new battery chargers in the corporate yard and do transformers and all that, but I still just wanted to kind of die on this hill and say, I don't think it's fair that people that were here last year that sold their carbon credits are paying for the people that are going to be coming next year.
Councilmember Ball.
So I'm happy for it to come back. I'd love to learn the very specifics of all of the mandates so we can learn what we can and can't do. For me personally, you may not agree with it, but I have a 2-year-old and I'm thinking about the future, and I personally, you don't have to agree, but I think we should be looking at ways to reduce fossil fuel use and looking at ways to be more efficient with our use of energy. So I don't mind it coming back. I think that would be great.
So before us is an amendment to the resolution that we've had before that adds additional ways. Any discussion about how to spend should be a separate item that comes back, because this is just a resolution that says we're adding ways that we can utilize these credits.
Correct.
Correct, okay. And any desire from any of the council members to spend that money within the parameters and have that discussion needs to be a council request and come back at a separate council meeting, is all I'm saying. I'm not saying, no.
I just wanted to bring up, nowhere in here under allowable uses does it say, give the owners of your electric company their dividend this year. It doesn't state that in here, not on all 3 pages. So that's why I wanted to bring it up. You have the option now. We could bring this back and we could discuss rebates and future uses depending on the amount of money we would want to rebate.
I wasn't
I just wanted to
denying
put
that.
it out here. That was my hill. I'm going to die right here now.
Absolutely.
Just let it go. If somebody wants to take action on it, that's it. I mean, it was 4-1 last time. I figured it'd probably go 4-1 again.
Just trying to keep it clear on the simple action that tonight all we're doing is adding allowances to the resolution, and that if there is a desire to discuss how we're spending it, that would need to be a separate request. Any other questions before we go to public comment on this item? Councilmember Vega.
So we can make a request right now, can't we, that Mr. Starbuck did not?
I would rather finish the item that is on the agenda.
Okay, so we're not going to approve this at this time? Is that what you're saying on the
No.
consent calendar?
No, what I'm saying is the item is just a request to add to the list of approved. Rebates to residents is already an approved use on the existing list. It's just not mentioned in the staff report. Councilmember Starbuck would like us to reconsider that, and I'm saying it's a separate item because it's a decision to spend money that is not agendized, so it needs to be a separate request. So we need to vote on this item first, and if what Councilmember Starbuck would like to be done is something that council wants to do. It needs to be a separate request made after we finish this item.
Okay, as long as Dirk doesn't forget.
All right. Public comment. If there's no other questions, I'd like to go to public comment on this item. If you'd like to speak to item number 9, you may come to the podium for 3 minutes, or you may call in at 805-875-8201, 805-875-8201. All right, seeing no one rise and no one come to call, we will close public comment on item number 9. Councilmember Aiello.
Is it possible, I know that Mr. Wilkie mentioned that rebates is already something that is allowable, but not necessarily listed per se, you know, on this particular request. But if it's in the ordinance, if it's not, even if it's just allowable but it's not listed, is it possible to approve this and add, City Attorney, just as a secondary and consideration for rebate?
To add rebates to the list in the resolution
Yes.
tonight. Yes, that's possible.
Okay, so I'd like to put a motion then that we do that we accept it and add it in there just so that Councilmember Starbuck is able to feel better about the uses of it, which I understand what he's saying. And then obviously, if we adopt this, request at the same time for that conversation to come back, unless it has to be a completely separate motion, which in case somebody else can do, or
Are you comfortable with incorporating that
I'm
request in
fine
the
with
motion?
it being the same motion. Yeah.
All right, so the motion on the floor includes your request to reconsider rebates. Would you like to give it a second? Yes.
Second.
All right, so the motion is to add rebates to the list and bring back a discussion of potential rebates.
That's not, the rebate that is allowable by AB 32 is a non-volumetric rebate. So it can't be based on how much people owe.
We
be
can't talk
based on-
about this. I've been harshed.
So if
It
we're
would be
we're
part of
adding
your
this-
presentation.
If we're adding it, we need to add that it's a non-volumetric.
Absolutely. I think making sure the rebate statement is clarified as part of the list is important. Do you accept that as?
understood and absolutely.
All right, and do you second that?
Absolutely and certainly.
All righty, so you get your clarification about the type of rebate that is allowed, and that a discussion about potential rebate will be added to a future agenda as part of the motion. Any other questions or clarity by anyone, staff or council?
Just a comment, I still may not agree with Councilmember Starbuck, but I'm grateful that all of our options are coming back.
No problem. All right, are you not going to say anything? You sure? All right, let's vote. And that passes 5-0. All right. Moving on to the final oral communications of the evening. If you would like to speak to the city issues, you may have 2 minutes. You can come to the podium, or you may call in at 805-875-8201.
Jim Mosby, Lompoc. So just one thing real fast with your utility commission. It shall recommend and act in advisory capacity. So a lot of your information that's brought out here probably should run through your utility commission. It is your public utility commission, and it doesn't say should, it says shall. And you can read the rest of your handbooks. But real fast on some other matters, you still didn't get a study with increased volumetric usage of utilities. If you increase 20 or 30% next year, maybe you don't need the rates, but that still should have a variable in there. There was another item that wasn't discussed here and brought to you guys that is part of the electric utility, And that's the fact that there's a $2 million a year franchise fee. You guys don't have to accept that. You can postpone it. Maybe you could get some more money back in there real fast if you were in need. $2 million a year taken out as a franchise fee. There was $2 million, little less than that, in raises and benefits that were passed out. That was also something that wasn't brought up, why you guys are having to do what you're having to do. It's important to put everything on the table when you're in your discussion. There's also something that's going on, if you can go back to the January 5th, 2021 meeting, about 2 hours in, you'll hear discussion about enterprise reimbursement. Former city manager says, laws have changed, it's not a legal study, yet millions of dollars have been taken. Millions of dollars have been taken for the electric utility under a study that is not legal anymore. There's also another thing that's going on, and that's the corporate yard redo. And it's anticipated 10 years ago to do this, that the electric utility would move to the corporate yard, the people at the corporate yard would move to the transit facility, and electric would pay who knows how much money. So $70 million bonded for what? Bonded for what? Where's the 5-year project coordination map? What are you buying for 71? Maybe you need to do it over 10 years, not 5 years. Figure it out. You're spending money. You're going to raise rates for things you have no idea what you're going to be spending money on. Get some of that in front of you to see what you're going to be doing. But some things to think about.
Seeing no one else rise, we will close oral communications and bring it back to council. And Councilmember Vega, any reports?
I'm going to encourage people to come out for our meeting when we have the utility rates again, that discussion. I'm not sure when that's going to come back, but I hope the public's paying attention. This affects your households. We'd love to have your input, and I think it's important that you guys, that the public shows up for this meeting. Also, is Dirk, you going to make that council request?
It's already coming back.
It's not your turn, but I just want to make sure.
It's already been made as part of the motion.
For his request, okay, part of that, okay. And I'd like to also make a council request. This rate study, I want to make sure or get some clarification if it has been run by the Utility Commission, at least to get any input if they have any kind of other recommendations. You know, I'm not sure if it already has been or if they're having meetings, but at least it'd be nice to have their input. They are our commissioners, and I think it's only prudent that they take a look at it if it hasn't been presented. So that would be my council request. See if anybody agrees.
Just, I guess a quick question, since my guy got thrown off, we don't have a quorum.
For clarification, he was not thrown off.
He's not there.
It was a temporary appointment, and it,
Right, but I mean, we
according
don't have
to-
quorum now.
There is not a quorum, there's only
Oh.
2.
No, you do. You have 3 people. There's 3 commissioners on the Utility Commission.
Who would those be?
Oh, last meeting there were 3 people. Was that the last meeting? There were 3 people at the last meeting.
Yes, there were. And Mr. Holloway's temporary appointment has been
Expired since
has
then.
been expired since January.
Oh,
Mayor,
Okay.
Mayor and City Clerk, I wanted to correct an answer I gave to Councilmember Starbuck earlier in the meeting. He asked if Mr. Holloway could be reappointed. And I said he could only be reappointed if he was appointed in his own district. But actually, since there are 2 other vacancies on the Utility Commission, another council member could make an out-of-district appointment to reappoint Mr. Holloway. And I think the 2 council members that have vacant seats on utilities are Vega and Aiello. So the Starbuck can't reappoint him because he can't be reappointed to the same seat. But I'm saying another council member that has a vacancy could make an out-of-district appointment to reappoint Mr. Holloway. I just wanted to make that clear. But he's right. As of right now, there is no quorum.
Can we make that appointment without another application, or can we?
No.
We can't?
No.
Why?
There is a rule that needs to be listed, and he hasn't put on an application.
Thank you. It was just new information. Thought I'd ask. Thank you. I have nothing to report.
so Mr. Holloway's recent attendance Luckily, there was no decision to be made. It was just a presentation, so it didn't really matter at the last Utility Commission, because I was in attendance at the last Utility Commission.
We can only correct things moving forward.
All right, thank you for that.
Mayor, my motion for.
Your
for it to run
request,
by-
yes.
My request, it doesn't fly, right? Because
It
we don't
doesn't
have a
fly
quorum.
if there's not a quorum, and until we have a quorum,
Can we put like a dummy in the chair and let them listen and take the?
I wouldn't ask for
Not a
that.
dummy,
Be
I didn't
careful of
mean
that one. All right, Councilmember Aiello,
No report.
Councilmember Starbuck,
No report.
Councilmember Ball.
Already talked too much, no reports.
All right. I attended the Lompoc Filipino American Club for their officer installation by invitation, and I just want to congratulate the city's own Alito Tabin for becoming the vice president of the organization. And he, much like he's known here as our MacGyver, the club also sees him as their MacGyver. So congratulations to Lito for being elected vice president of the Lompoc Filipino American Club. I also attended the Hancock Honors. This year, one of the honorees was our prior mayor, Joyce Howerton, for all of the work that she's done in our community, in particular, founding and establishing the North County Rape Crisis Center. And I just want to say congratulations to her again, and that I was proud to represent our community for the council and the city. Recently, the most recent Project Opioid meeting was held just this past week. Good news, we're seeing a downward trend in opioid overdose deaths in Lompoc in particular. Countywide, a 37% drop has occurred. Without knowing for sure, the discussion was the fact that we have the Narcan, and that not only is fire, but police is trained, and that many in our community have it, and across the county, and so prevention is helping. So I just want to thank everyone for supporting that and for hearing that while we still have too many overdose, we are seeing a reduction. I've also attended the Local Area Formation Committee, LAFCO, which is regarding annexations, Utility Commission in this rotation, new information that I will work on addressing. The Library Commission, currently on my rotation. The 9/11 Memorial, I want to thank both the fire department for hosting it and for a great turnout by our police department in that memorial. Santa Barbara County Area Government's sub-regional meeting. And I tried to attend the ribbon cutting for the new tractor supply company that was to be held at 9 o'clock, and I got there and they'd already cut the ribbon at 8:55. So, welcome to the community. It's exciting to have an empty building that's been empty for well over 12, 15 years, finally have a business in it. The Lompoc District Library Foundation is having a fundraiser on October 12th at the Anderson Rec Center. It is a concert with Frank Sinatra and Elvis impersonators. Tickets are available, $40 for the individual or $70 for a couple, and you can call 805-315-8314. And I say that because all funds raised will support Charlotte Webb Bookmobile, which we all love and adore, and thrilled that they're raising money for that. The United Way fundraiser is October 5th. You can go to their website. It's the United Way for Northern Santa Barbara County. They have an all-encompassing ticket of $200, which is dinner, premier seating, and concert, or they have a $25 general admission for concert only. It will be at the Stockyards in Orcutt. The concert is Molly Ringwell's project. All of the funds raised go to support their literacy program, which they are expanding to all of Lompoc, children born at Lompoc Hospital. And when they reach elementary school age, they start in a financial literacy program. So they will get books from birth, and then a financial literacy program that starts a savings account for them and incentivizes that they receive access to upon graduation, and they're expanding it to every child born at the Lompoc Hospital through the funds raised here. And then last but not least, October 13th is the Cypress Art Gallery's 30-year celebration from 1 to 3 p.m. at the Cypress Art Gallery. I do have one council request. The Library Commission was discussing trying to fill its open spots. Currently, the structure only allows for one position outside of the city limit. They would like to consider that 2 of the 5 seats be considered outside of the city limits within the 93436. That would need to be a council decision. My request is that we bring that back for discussion and a vote, and would appreciate support in changing that structure.
I'll give you a second.
Thank you. Can I get a third? Yes. And Starbuck, give me the third. All right. Given that, we will now adjourn this meeting until the next regular meeting on October 1st at 6:30 p.m.